all ready? Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Are you all ready? Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Get set. Let's go. Does your hair look right? Is your fly done up? Have you popped your pimples? Have you got your coat and some nippy on? Just keep it simple. Are you all cashed up? I could lend you some. Well, I'd be glad to. Have you had a think and a warm-up drink? No, 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 no. Are you all ready? Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Are you all ready? Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Get set. Let's go. Is the cat put out? Is he iron off? We don't want to come home to a fire. Have you trimmed your beard? Are your sandals shine? Do you look like a hipster messiah? Have you got your keys? Have you got ID? Did you bring a comb for Gary? Have you had a think and a warm-up drink? No, 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 no. Are you all ready? Are you ready? Get
Hey Dan, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Everyone? We're going to get
Good.
started in just about a minute and a half. We're just allowing for
Perfect.
folks to arrive for the 9 o'clock start.
No problem, no problem. And the judging app, you send it via email, right? I remember seeing it somewhere.
Yep.
Perfect.
We'll send it to you through private chat also if there's anyone's missing.
Let me double check. Just between last night and this morning, I had like 35 emails.
Nothing like a good morning of a cup of coffee and
Exactly.
a few scores of emails.
Things are very calm here right now.
We'll get started in just a few moments. We're allowing the students to arrive, and we have a few people who are on right now, so we'll give that a few moments.
Hey Dan, the app came from you, or you sent it? It's from your email box?
Yeah, last night it says voting link.
Okay.
You actually replied to it.
Of course I did. Hey, how are you? Pretty good.
We'll get started in just a few moments. Students are still arriving, and we will get you guys started in just a few moments. Hang in there for a couple. All right. I see my partner in crime, John, is coming from behind the scenes. Good morning, John.
Morning, Dan. Morning, everyone.
Students are
Morning.
filing in. They're coming in at 9 o'clock right at the bell. We'll make sure they don't get a late pass. Don't worry, we're not handing those out today. But you guys are all going to be getting started in just a few minutes. John, we're going to give them like one more minute. And then we have a little exercise for you guys because we figure it is early in the morning. We want to get you started and to get you energized. So we have a little bit of a challenge. So while we're waiting for other folks to arrive, John, if you could share for a moment the challenge.
Absolutely. Let me get that over here. And here it is.
All right. Well, here's a challenge. This is a little bit of a thought teaser. And since we know we have a lot of data scientists and people great at predicting, let's see if you can predict this. An umpire unexpectedly calls timeout in the middle of a play in a baseball game. What do you think happens next? Based on what you see on the screen, we want you to make a prediction. To do that, you're going to go to polev.com and you're going to enter D. Seawald 540. You can see the instructions up on the poll here. So again, an umpire calls timeout unexpectedly in the middle of a baseball game. What do you think happens next? So take a look. Wow, something happened, John. I'm not sure what it is. The pitcher looks a little bemused and surprised. The guy on second base over there looks a little confused. So does the batter. Why did that umpire call timeout in the middle of the play? I can't think of any good reasons off the top, but it's your turn. If you're a baseball fan, great. If you're not, use your imagination. So votes are going to start coming in. The poll is live. What happens next?
Don't worry, it's totally anonymous. So feel free to.
Profanity should be avoided at all costs, but feel free to make your prediction. So I see other folks are arriving. As you're arriving, we are having a little bit of a brain teaser to see how well folks can predict. And the challenge is an umpire unexpectedly calls timeout right in the middle of a play. And given that, we want to know, what do you think happens next? Cast your vote by going to pollev.com. You could do it on your phone. You could do it on your computer. You could do it on your tablet. You could do it on any other device that you feel like you want to use. But go to pollev.com, DC1540. John, the answers are starting to roll in. An audience member walked onto the pitch. Sounds like a soccer fan to me. Yeah, a duck flew in. You never know when a duck will flow in. Umpire goes to the bathroom or the washroom. Interesting. Well, you know, when nature calls, you can't stop the game. So I guess you can then if you are the umpire. We'll take just another maybe 15, 30 seconds while folks are filing in. While they're filing in, take a few moments to cast your ballot. Come up with your reason. What do you think happens next?
Procedure code is we did research.
Ovechkin is pitching. Sounds like a hockey fan there. They drop the bat and they shake hands. A nice show of sportsmanship. Not enough of that in baseball, if you ask me. Keep them coming in. We'll take last couple of moments. I know you guys are good at predicting, so make your predictions. They could be funny, they could be real. All right, last chance for those folks who've come in. Predictions coming in. All right, John, I think we have enough predictions in. Player on the left passed out. Oh, that could happen. It can get sweltering. All right, John. Well, let's see if we can go to the videotape. Let's see what actually happened, how good you guys are at predicting. Whether you submitted or not, I'm sure you had an answer or two in your mind. John, let's go to the videotape. What actually happened on one sultry afternoon at a baseball game? Oh, look what it is. So not a duck, but it was a cat on the field. And you know, the cat didn't just go into the stands. It ran through the entire stadium. They couldn't catch it. So nobody guessed it, but I have a feeling you guys are going to do a really good job of predicting. And you know, in the spirit of baseball, there was a great philosopher / baseball player named Yogi Berra who famously said in one of his many malapropisms, it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. So we're going to leave it to you to make some predictions today, to share with us how you went about the process, what you did, to tell us how good you are predicting a much more important challenge. So you will all have your turns. You'll have an opportunity to kind of bring things to life. But for now, what I'd like to do is kind of set the stage a little bit more. John, if you can bring up your slides, please. So first things first, I'd like to officially thank all of you, our teams that made it to the finals, for being here today. We know it was a lot of work over a few weeks' time, and we also know that it was a difficult challenge, and some of you have done an amazing job. As you've probably already heard in our original kind of primer for the presentation, not every team made it to the finals. 4 teams dropped out. And we even had one team last night that decided they couldn't do it. So there are 7 teams presenting today. You each will get your just due, but we thank you for making it to the finish line, but we're not done yet. All right, John, if you can cue up the slides again, please. So What do we have next? It's time to hear from our sponsor from Novartis, the person who helped architect and design this concept and help bring this to life. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Nurai Yurt. Nurai, thank you for, first of all, for hosting, making this possible. But we'd like to turn to you for a moment to have your say and share some words of wisdom about the journey with the folks who are going to be presenting to us over the next few hours.
Thank you so much, Dan. I really want to thank everyone, first of all. I mean, putting time in. I understand for students, I mean, this is a lot of commitment for the 2 weeks that was, happening. And I totally recognize all the effort that they need to put in. I definitely want to take our judges and partners in Novartis as well, because they really, besides everything else going on in Novartis's work, they really volunteered their time to help support the students. And we have many supporters. I mean, obviously the data team, our partners, who helped us to bring you the data as well as some of the coding. So I definitely want to start thanking to them. And I want students to really feel super comfortable. I think we really want to do this to kind of get co-learning. I mean, understanding how their approaches and us, being sometimes too close to the problems, get some blindness from being too close to the problems and to the data. So I really want them to kind of feel super relaxed. I mean, this will really be not as formal, as normally our daily lives, but I really want everyone to kind of do their best, and then hopefully we will be able to distribute some, gift cards at that. So, which is always fun to do, right? So that's kind of the motivation that's out there. But I'm super excited to get to know so many of you like this, even though virtually, and hopefully we will do this at some point in person. And also I'm super excited and can't wait to see all the presentations as well. Thank you, Dan.
Awesome. Thank you, Nurai. And we can't wait to see you guys in person, but we're excited to hear what you guys are going to have to say today. So this brings me to the next bit, which is the ground rules. So we've got Gellert, who's been our data science guru, and has been helping to kind of architect things on the design side and what to expect. Now, there shouldn't be any ground rules that are unexpected, but what we want to do is just go back over again for everybody who's participating. What will it look like? What will we expect? And I'm going to turn it over to Gellert to be able to share a couple more details about the ground rules and what we'll be doing. Gellert.
You're on mute, Gellert.
Sorry. Do you have Dan? Oh, there you go. That's what I was. So I was just gesturing to show me the slide that I was going to talk about. So, all right, cool. So basically, the idea here is that we wanted to make this as sort of like a scientific process as possible as we are kind of going through the presentation. So I was hoping to get a discussion that would start with a problem statement. If you could describe the methodology, tools, and results, basically, I mean, it can be very loose, so it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be totally scientific, but we do want to get an idea of what you guys have done. And then it would be really nice to have a discussion about, the findings and the limitations, just to get an idea of, so you've done this work, what does this all mean? And then if you don't mind closing the conversation, or your presentation, just to see, so what is your conclusion as you're finishing this project? And then we would like to have maybe about five minutes at the end to have some opportunity to ask some questions. Obviously, we won't pepper you with questions because the time is limited. But we do want to spend some time here, in case there's something interesting that somebody wants to ask. Right. So that's kind of the process. Now, I mentioned that you have about 15 minutes to present, and then we are leaving about 5 minutes for questions and answers. And we created a voting criteria. So there'll be some judges, watching the presentations. And we are going to be using a 1 to 5 scale, for judging across a couple of criteria. And then at the end of the day, you know, once everybody is finished, we'll kind of rank everybody, and we'll come up with first, second, and third ranking, right? So that's kind of the idea. By the way, yesterday I pulled everybody's accuracy and accuracy scores together. So do you have slides on there, or you want me to show them?
You're welcome to show it, actually.
So let me share my screen then, if you don't mind.
Sure.
We're going to pass the ball over to you.
Yep. So tell me if you see. It's just an Excel sheet. So what you see here is, let me see if I can get rid of this. So I have the teams. So some of them, you know, you just listed yourself as team 7 or 6 or whatever, and there were a couple of entries that I didn't know who it belonged to, but you probably recognize yourself here. So so these are the scores that you all submitted, so we can kind of compare them against each other. You can see that the team that was called Breast Friend submitted 3 different entries for the first objective. So there are some scores here for that. I didn't want to select your best score because you know, you can talk about that during the presentation. And then the only other thing that I wanted to mention here is that, so I got Team 4's results yesterday, which is here, but there was another entry, Team 4. It was called Team 4, I think. So I don't know if it's the same. So if it's not the same team, then it's here. If it is, then just ignore that line. So what's really interesting here is that you take a look at the accuracy scores, and they range from, you know, like the 0.6 all the way to, which is, this one is the best score, it looks like, to the 0.96 or 0.97 area, right? So it's a pretty nice prediction. So I guess we can spend some time on figuring out how you did this. And then we are also looking at sensitivity and specificity, right? So in case of this disease, I think both of these are really important, right? Because if you have a problem, you do want to make sure that you are aware of it, that it exists. And if you don't want to spend any time worrying about it. So both of these are incredibly important. The same thing is on objective 2 side, right? So who goes to you know, second line therapy? I mean, you want to be very, very careful about sensitivity and specificity, in addition to the accuracy metrics, right? So you can see here the work in terms of accuracy is a little bit better in terms of the distribution, right? So most of the teams, actually all the teams, did an extremely good job here. And then you know, you can see the sensitivity and specificity scores. I put some ranks here, so you can see that the Breast Friend team did reached you know, so that is the #1 accuracy rank. And they also had the best sensitivity, but then their specificity score was 4th ranked. These other teams, Team 4 and then Team 12, did better on that specificity score front, right? So you can kind of see how you did. On the other side, this is objective 2 on the right hand side. So here we have you know, Breast Friend, that group ranking #1 in accuracy and specificity, but then Team 1 did a little bit better on sensitivity. Now, I was talking earlier about the Kaggle competition, right? So this is not that, right? So we won't be. So if this was that kind of competition, then we would call it a day here, right? Because we would say, okay, we found a winner on both of these. Here's your gift card. See you later, right? So that's not what we're doing here. In fact, this score is more just to get an interesting perspective on how you performed. The most important thing now is to kind of look at the presentations and have a conversation about, you know, methods, findings, results, and limitations, right? So I'm just gonna give the microphone back to you guys.
Great. Well, we've got
Yes.
a couple more things to highlight as well. And Igor, you're about to comment.
Yes, just want to add to Gellert. I think Gellert 3, thanks so much for working everybody through the process. And just want to add here, it's not only about the numbers. It's about the data science and how we are all emerged in the amazing, innovative world of the predictive analytics and data science for oncology. And especially the problem we're trying to resolve here, it's many great science we're trying to resolve over the years. It's how we predict progression to the metastatic disease, right? Which is lethal disease, which is incurable, and how we can prevent that, and how we can prevent other progressions. And I really want to thank everybody for your great work and contribution, and really for I'm really glad that everybody had the opportunity and to start this learning process to emerge in the world of the oncology data science, which is now becoming so tremendously popular and becoming really one of the top data science disciplines in the whole world, and especially with the final goal, finally get to the curative settings, identify the ways how we can cure oncology patients. Thank you.
Thanks, Igor. So just to kind of recap, as you heard both from Gellert and Igor, that the numbers matter, but that's not all that matters. If we can put up there the judging criteria, John. And so the judging criteria are creativity. So creativity in your approach matters, irrespective of the results. The technical rigor also matters, and we've already heard that. Execution. Could you inspire the confidence of the judges that the methodology will work? Clarity and persuasion, both in your presentation. Very important. As you heard John talk about on Wednesday, giving some presentation tips, the way you tell the story, the way you bring it to life is just as important. So 5 dimensions that we'll be judging on. The judges will be using a rating tool after each presentation. We'll share those scores, but we won't reveal the results until the very end, until all teams have presented. All right. Well, with that in mind, that's the process and the criteria. Let's just take a moment to meet and also thank some of the judges from Novartis. We do also have a couple of guest stars in the room here today. So I'd like to, first of all, put them on the spot. I apologize for doing this because I didn't ask you to do it, but Mohanad from Rutgers, if you're still on, Mohanad, first of all, I want to thank you for helping as faculty at Rutgers to sponsor. If you have a couple of words for some of the students as a data science professional, just wanted to take a moment to thank you and if you'd like to say a couple of words as well.
Well, good morning, Dan, and good morning to everybody on the call. Thank you for including us. This is always a great opportunity for students to be involved in as close to a real life situation as they can in a professional setting. Obviously, the coaching and the feedback that each team had from their respective coaches is really invaluable. I've seen other competitions similar to this, where really the interaction between students and the feedback from the coaches is really, really invaluable. And I am positive that this experience, regardless of the results, will be a stepping stone for a lot of our students and other students participating in learning more basically about healthcare. A lot of students I know on this call may not have had healthcare as a target career stop after their studies, but this is definitely one way to introduce them to a career that really involves a lot of data science, and increasingly so. So I want to thank the team at Novartis and obviously you, Dan, for doing all the necessary background and legwork that is needed to make this a success, and good luck to everybody.
Thanks again for being involved, to bring Rutgers involved, and to all the other universities as well, Columbia, NYU, Rutgers, NGIT, Stevens Institute, Johns Hopkins, University of Cincinnati. Hopefully I didn't miss anybody, but thank you guys all for being a part of this. Now, I mentioned that there was also some coaches, and Mohanad, you had references. You've all met Igor, you've met Gellert, you've also met Narai, but there are quite a few other people who are hackathon help desk coaches And while we don't have everybody on right at this moment, we do have a few. So we want to just give them a moment to introduce themselves, what they do at Novartis, as a thanks to our coaches, because they haven't worked with every team. So again, we're going to put a few people on the spot just to say hello. If we can ask for Eric to just say a quick hello. Eric, can I impose upon you to come on and come out and say hello there for a moment? I see Eric is still on mute or camera shy.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Can you see me?
I can.
Great. So thanks Nurain, Igor and Gellert, like, for this great initiative. I mean, we are all on this journey together. We are trying to bring those new insight to Novartis, and then I'm hoping we'll all be able to learn something on what each team gonna present. So I'm Eric Momo, and then I support Adagveo. It's a new product that we launched recently in sickle cell disease. It's also fairly new. We are also trying to see, can we predict a patient who can go to Adagveo? So I'm hoping we can learn something here to transfer to that shortly. So I've been with Novartis for 6 years now, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to hear what you have to say. Good luck for everyone. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. And Gary, if I can impose upon you as well, quick intro. Who are you? What do you do at Novartis?
While he's coming on board, I've also seen Dan from our side, Dan Piliak. So
Yeah,
he's
Dan
also there.
We'll jump to Dan then for a moment. Dan, if I can impose upon you real quick to say hello and introduce
Hi,
yourself.
everyone. Hi, everyone. And thank you again for participating in this. I'm Dan Pilak-Watkins, and I lead marketing analytics capabilities at Novartis. So very close to predictive analytics, just a little bit different area.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. And we have quite a few other folks who've been behind the scenes, who've been involved. So thanks to all the coaches. They'll be joining during the presentations and weighing in. But for now, I think it's ready. We're ready to move on. So John, the teams. So you guys know who you are, but I just want to highlight for a moment as we move to the next bit here, John, that the teams that remained are 7 teams. Team 1 from Columbia University, Team 3 from Columbia, and Team 4 from Columbia. NYU as a remaining team, Team 6, Team 7 from Rutgers, and Team 10, the composite from NJIT, Hopkins, and University of Cincinnati. And then last but not least, Team 12 from Columbia University. Great representation. Congratulations on you guys coming to the finals. So big virtual round of applause and virtual high five to you as well. So here are the presentation orders. We have 2 rounds. We have 7 teams. Round 1 will be 4 teams. We're going to start with Team 1. And just know, Team 1, we're going to give you a couple-minute break before we kick off so you can get your slides and everything together. So don't worry, we're not going to jump right in. We'll give you a couple minutes to ready. Team 4, you'll be going next, Dr. Darwin. Team 6, Miliora from New York University. Team 10, Breast Friend. Round 2, we'll take a short break, and then those 3 teams, Teams 12 from Columbia, Sozu, Team 7, MB6 from Rutgers, and last but not least, Team 3, Affinitor from Columbia will round it out. We'll take a short break after round 2. The judges will go into a breakout, and we will then go from there to do some deliberations, and then we'll come back to announce who the top 3 winners are of the hackathon. So be ready. We're going to get started in just a few moments. So from there, round 1, Don, if you can move that on, please. Thank you. So round 1, we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. We're going to allow for the data wizards who are going to be up first to get themselves prepared. You guys are going to take control of the screen, but before you do, we're going to give everyone a 3-minute break so you can catch your breath, get your materials together, and we're going to cut to the commercial for just a few moments. Team 1, get yourself ready. We're going to get started right at 9:30, right at 9:30. All right, so nobody go anywhere. We're excited to see you guys coming on back in just a few minutes. Team one, you're on deck. Get your materials ready.
When I look into your eyes, it's like watching the night sky or a beautiful sunrise. Well, there's so much they hold, and just like them old stars, I see that you've come so far to be right where you are. How old is your soul? Well, I won't give up on us, even if the skies get rough. I'm giving you all my love. I'm still looking up, and when you're needing your space to do some navigating, I'll be here patiently waiting to see what you find. 'Cause even the stars, they...
All right, guys. We're now at half past the hour, and we are ready to start round one. Data Wizards, I hope you're ready. We were going to turn the floor over to you. You're going to have 15 minutes. We will signal you with time, not to interrupt, but just so you know where the time is. We'll put a clock up as well, and the floor is yours. So I'm going to turn that over to you now, Data Wizards.
Hello, Dan. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dashansh. I'm from Team 1, that is Data Wizards, where we make magic with the data. So first of all, I want to say that we are really excited for this opportunity. And also, if I'm not mistaken, this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So we are really enthusiastic about this cause, and yeah, that's it. So, so to begin off, breast cancer. So breast cancer is said to be the second most common cause of death caused by cancer in women, which is a really disturbing fact. And something to worry about is when breast cancer metastasizes, which means that the original tumor, it breaks from its original location and it spreads to different parts of the body. And the cause of concern of metastatic breast cancer is that it cannot be cured. It can just be treated. And even the treatment varies from person to person. And there's another fact that 1/3 of the women who are diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, they live at least 5 years or 10 in some cases. after the diagnosis. So the doctors, they generally prescribe a certain set of drugs or procedures to treat the cancer, and which is collectively known as the line of therapy. And unfortunately, it's common that patients, they develop an immune reaction to the line of therapy, and so the doctors have to just change a few things in the line of therapy, thereby enabling a second line of therapy. So that's about breast cancer. Uh, so our task in the hackathon is divided into two objectives. First objective is to correctly predict whether a patient has breast cancer or metastatic breast cancer. We have used data like the procedure files, prescription files, as well as the diagnosis files to achieve this. And finally, for objective 2, we are trying to predict if a patient in one line of therapy will progress to the second line of therapy or not. So with that, I would like to hand over my presentation to Shaurya. So Shaurya.
Hey Dashansh, thank you so much for that. Before I go ahead, I wanted to let you know that we cannot see the screen, the slides changing. So I think you need to go into full screen mode, or you need to just reshare. Or let me know if I need to share. Everyone, I'm really sorry about this.
You may just need to take the ball because it's sitting with your team member.
And no problem at all. Take your time. Let's make sure that everybody has the opportunity to present. I think it's very important.
Hey Shaurya, can you see the slides changing?
No, I can't. Dashansh, I think I'll just go ahead and present my screen.
Sure.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, we're all living in the new normal with technology. So everybody is super adapted to this.
There you go, Shaurya. Your slides are coming up.
Okay, I hope everyone can see my screen.
We can.
Yes, very well. Thank you. Wonderful.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about the data. So the data that we have for this particular project was basically three kinds of data. It was diagnosis data, it was procedure data, as well as prescription data. It was taken for over 20,000 patients, and this kind of data is called longitudinal anonymized patient data, because this data is collected for every patient over a period of time. In our case, over a year as well. And it's anonymized, so we do not have any tags for the particular patients itself. Diagnosis data is basically data which is taken for the patients when they visit the doctor and what kind of diagnosis he comes up with. Procedure data is the kind of procedures that they undergo and what exactly the doctor prescribes to them. And prescription data are basically the drugs or the products that the patients claim. Now, before we move ahead to modeling and methodology, we first need to understand the data. And like in every other data science project, first we need to understand the data. And for that, a couple of visualizations are very important. The first visualization on the left that you can see here are basically a proportion of visit intervals. We wanted to understand what is the proportion of patients which are visiting doctors within a 30-day time period, a 30 to 100-day time period, and so on. This gives us an idea of what is the frequency of patient visits. The next chart on the right here that you can see is basically the proportion of metastatic to non-metastatic breast cancer patients. The first bar, which is labeled as 0, are basically non-metastatic, and the second bar is 1. So the ratio is approximately 11,000 to 9,000 patients. Here we have basically we wanted to understand what are the procedures which are most frequent when it comes to when it comes to the procedures that the patients undergo, and we just got an idea of based on these procedure codes. That's pretty much it. We wanted to understand what are the procedure codes which are most frequent for breast cancer patients. And similarly, we wanted to identify what were the different diagnoses that the doctors had for those patients and what is the frequency of those. If I'm not wrong, the first three, the first three that you can see on the left are basically malignant neoplasms of either they are unspecified or of the outer bone and the upper outer quadrant. And finally, the final insight we have from the data is for the second objective, we wanted to understand what are the different drugs that doctors prefer when it comes to different lines of therapy. Basically, what are the different drugs that are more frequent for the first line of therapy when it comes to the second line of therapy? The top three drugs remain the same. However, we do notice that there is a change in the drugs when it comes to the second line of therapy. We see that Ibrance is more popular as compared to Exemistan when it comes to the second line of therapy as compared to the first. And with that, I will now hand over to Kirtan, who will be talking about methodology and modeling.
Hey everybody.
Oh,
Thanks, Shaya.
Kirtan, I'm really, really sorry.
That's
I just want to quickly just talk about the pre-processing as well. So very quickly, we dropped the irrelevant features and we handled missing values. To label patients as being metastatic or not, we did so based on their diagnosis code as well as the service dates of their diagnosis records. So if a patient is being diagnosed as metastatic 30 days after he is diagnosed as having breast cancer, that patient is labeled as metastatic. The next thing that we wanted to do was in the drug or the product data or the RX data, we needed to identify the 10 different type of breast cancer brands. That gives us an idea of what are the most commonly used drugs. And similarly, we have dropped data for the drugs which were not related to breast cancer related diseases. And we've dropped the same records for diseases for the patients which do not have breast cancer related diseases. We've only kept the records related to breast cancer. And finally, to identify the patient's line of therapy, we did so based on drug IDs. So you can have different identifiers to see which one will flag off that the line of therapy has changed. In our case, for the modeling, we've used drug ID. Alternate methods, alternate identifiers in our case could be the breast cancer branded drugs, which basically will show us the progression of treatment for a patient. And now I will hand over to Kirtan.
Thanks, Shaya. Hi everybody. My name is Kirtan. So moving on to objective one, the objective that we had was to predict if a certain patient would be diagnosed as metastatic or not. So this in some sense reduced down to a binary classification problem for us. So when it comes to the data, what we did not use the RX data, we used both the procedure as well as the diagnosis data. And what we were particularly interested in is our patients who got progressively worse as their treatment progressed. So what we ended up doing was to drop the patients who were already diagnosed as metastatic from the beginning itself. So what we tried out was initially a survival analysis kind of model. So for that, we were particularly interested in patients who got progressively worse as their treatment progressed as compared to, say, getting better with treatment. So in order to do that, we designed new features. The first new feature that we generated from the procedure data is known as interval stability. So this takes into account the frequency, the dates at which the patient visited their healthcare provider. And then we take the difference between successive visits. So maybe in days, how much was the difference between successive visits? And then we see, we take the difference of that as well. So we're trying to find how stable is somebody's frequency of visiting. And then we end up taking the percentage of non-zeros. In addition, we also thresholded this at plus or minus 7 days to allow for some leeway, because patients may not immediately be going to their healthcare provider back, say 30 days every single time after 30 days. So that was the first feature. The second feature was the increase in unit percentage, which calculated, this was for injections if I'm not wrong, and how much more was prescribed to the patient as the treatment went along in terms of the amount of the drug itself. Because the intuition behind this was that maybe more amount of the drug was being prescribed to the patient if they got worse. So max procedures at a time, the intuition is similar. Maybe that a patient would go through more number of procedures per day if they progressively got worse. Similarly, we generated new features from the diagnosis data as well. So bilateral was a feature which was one hot encoded and told us whether primary tumor showed on both sides or not. Original sites speaks about how many different sites were mentioned in the diagnosis itself. And the difference in days is the time interval between a patient being diagnosed as having breast cancer and it metastasizing. So if they did not develop metastatic breast cancer, then we calculated the difference between the other breast cancer diagnosis date and the final date, which was there in our records, which was 30th of December 2019. Okay, so we used a number of models. So the first model that we used was the time-dependent survival analysis, as I mentioned. So as you can see, the features have p-values which are significant, which talks about these features being important. This is shown by the coefficient as well. Moving on to the next model, we chose hyperparameters as having 6 layers using ReLU activation functions with a sigmoid unit in the last layer, since it was a binary classification problem. We used a binary cross entropy loss function and an ADAM optimizer as well. So the results that we have submitted are shown, but we strongly believe in this team that we make magic with data. It's just that we didn't have enough time, and given a little more time, we made a little more magic with our data. And you can see that our accuracy did improve, even though we did not submit these results. The last model that we tried was XG boosting, and the accuracy, sensitivity, as well as specificity are as mentioned on the slide. Moving on to the second objective, we tried to predict which patients would move on to a different line of therapy. For this, we only used the RX data file, which was aggregated by patient. So per patient, there was only one record, and the features that we used were the scaled drug IDs up to a maximum of 3 drugs, the interval in days between shifting over from one line of therapy to the second. So we used, again, a vanilla neural network, an SVM, and a logistic regression as well. Except the problem was that we used sklearn as a tool when it came to the SVM and logistic regression. And as you know, sklearn does not support GPUs. So we were not able to obtain results in time because it simply meant that it trained for too long and it wasn't able to fit. So we stuck to the neural network, and coming to the details of it, we used ReLU activations again, sigmoid on the final classification layer. We used binary cross entropy and ADAM optimization. This time it was a 5-layer dense neural network, and the results are as shown on the screen. Like I mentioned before, deadlines are important, but to this team, getting the best possible models is even more so. So we decided to take another approach for objective 1. So what we ended up doing was taking data sets all of PX, RX, as well as DX, where there were multiple rows per patient, and we converted them to a single row per patient. But let's say that for multiple rows, let's say there were 3 rows for one particular patient. In the new data set, we'd have 3 columns instead of that. Instead of 3 rows, there would be 3 columns, and there would be only 1 row per patient. So we converted all the categorical data which was there to numerical data. So again, we took the days between visits and we binned it into 10 to 35, 35 to 100, the same pie chart that was presented by Sharia. And also we used a technique which is known as bag of words. So this technique basically was used to the procedure codes, diagnosis codes, as well as the drug IDs. So what this says is that if a patient was given drug 2 twice and drug 1 twice, the count, drug 1 and drug 2 will both be columns, and the counts of these drugs would be taken as the value. So drug ID 1 would be 2 and drug ID 2 as well would be 2. And the way we approached this problem was across visits, if any diagnosis code was corresponding to metastatic breast cancer, that patient was marked as 1 in the MBC column. This meant that the sequence info was lost. So there was no info as to when a patient was diagnosed as metastatic, just that the patient was. And instead of filling in zeros, which meant for a particular column that a procedure was not carried out, we filled the nans with 1. So this resulted in a large data set having 17,000 rows and about 11,000 columns. So since this had such a large number of columns, we went with a very wide neural network architecture, which started with 2024 neurons having ReLU activations, followed by a dropout having 0.2 as its activation rate because of the fact that the 2024 neurons were very prone to overfitting. Similarly, for 1028 neurons, we had a dropout of 0.1, followed by the subsequent layers had neurons which were divided, number of neurons were divided by 2 in the next layer. And we ended up getting results which were far better than our initial results for objective 1 itself. So moving on, I would like to pass it on to Dashansh to talk about the limitations and the future scope of our work.
Yeah, thank you, Kirtan, for that. So I would like to talk about the limitations as well as the future scope for this challenge. So first of all, the model that we use for these two objectives are general classification models. And the problem with these models is that they are unable to capture the temporal relation between the records, which means that if there is there is an order, like a patient is getting drug number 1 and drug number 2 and drug number 3, then this kind of information, the order in which the drug comes, is not interpreted by the normal general classification models. That's why we should use a more sophisticated time series based model which could understand this temporal relationships between records. Then one problem that we faced was one hot encoding of categorical data, because for example, let's say procedure code. So there are actually 6,000 unique procedure codes, and if we one hot encode this code, then we will end up with 6,000 columns. Each are binary columns which indicate that the procedure has happened or not. So ultimately, this would hog your random access memory, and if your RAM is very low, then your system might crash too. So we faced this problem, and one possible solution is like a special encoding method that could reduce this 6,000 columns into, let's say, 10 or 20 columns. So if that kind of method would be available to us, we would have got some better results. Then moving on, like I said, if procedure codes, there were 6,000 procedure codes, and if there could be a classification of these codes available, just like you provided us with the drug brand classification, like there were 10 brands for each drug ID. So if something like that could be available for procedure codes, then we would also have gotten better results out of it. Okay, and lastly, so as Kirtan mentioned that some standard classification models like SVMs and log-reg were found to be slow because the data set was too large and they couldn't process that much data in a small period of time. So that was another limitation. And lastly, we actually have used drug ID as an identifier for second objective. So using drug ID as an identifier, we have ended with actually 15,000 patients out of 20,000 patients, which are progressing to, just a second. Okay, so if we have taken drug ID as an identifier for line of therapy, we ended up with 15,000 patients who have second line of therapy, and the rest 5,000 patients who doesn't. And but if we have used drug brands instead of drug IDs, we would have ended up with an equal distribution of first line of therapy as well as the second line of therapy. And we speculate that this could have improved the results further. So that's it for the limitations and future scope. And finally, I think we are done with the presentation. Now will be happy to take any questions.
Right. All right, Team One. Thank you, Data Wizards, and for bringing some magic. We do have some questions from our judges. So I'm going to start with a few of our Novartis judges to begin with. Gellert, I'm going to turn to you first. Questions that you have for Team One. And other judges, feel free to chat your questions or to jump in after Gellert. But we'll start with you, Gellert, first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So thank you very much for the presentation. I think it was great, and I really appreciate the work that went into it. I guess the only question that I have is, so you guys went down the road of neural networks. Was that sort of I mean, I guess you spent in an objective when you spent some time on some of these ensemble kind of models as well, but was there a specific reason why you went down that road? Like, is that something that you discovered in the data during the EDA, or what was the reason for that?
Anyone from Team One can answer.
Oh, okay, I will take this question.
Keaton, do you want to feel that?
I will take this question. So from the beginning, I thought ideally the best model will be the survival analysis, because it's very obvious. It's obvious that whether diagnosed as metastatic breast cancer or not can be considered as a survival model. So we start from the survival model, but I think it's something still something more to do with the time-dependent covariate engineering. Maybe it's our engineering is not sophisticated enough, so the model didn't give our excellent performance. So we moved to other models, and it is I think it's kind of intuitive, because we're doing some classification, and all the features is kind of, yeah, I checked the I checked the correlation metrics, but there's no significant correlation within the variables and the predictor. That's why I moved directly to the ensembling models instead of simple regression on this. And I think Keaton has something to add, right?
But then you guys spent a lot more time on neural networks, right? Like, is that where most of the work was, or you kind of did everything and you're just kind of presenting? Go ahead.
Hi, Gellert. So the reason we went with neural networks is because of the fact that, like we mentioned, sklearn, any methodology that we used there was a lot slower.
Okay.
So what we found was that maybe with the help of Google Cloud, we were able to harness the power of GPUs for using modules like TensorFlow and for Keras, which is why we went down the road. We were able to try out models and iterate faster using something like a neural network using Keras, which is why we went down, we chose to focus more on neural networks in that way. It was because of the fact that we had infrastructure capable of dealing with such a large data set, whereas modules like sklearn did not do so well.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, great job, guys. Really, really very, very interesting approach. Quick question on the predictors, because we're trying to predict metastatic breast cancer progression, right? Apart from the frequency of the visits or combined, did you see any particular ICD-10 codes, any particular diagnosis, any particular procedures that could be strong predictors of the metastatic breast cancer?
I think there could be, but we didn't go to that detail because I checked the procedure code. There's more than 1,000 unique procedures, and I tried to do it manually to say there's something kind of I can extract some meaningful words out of it, and I do something manually, but I failed to do so. So I have to just to calculate the frequency and take them as a predictor. That's what I mentioned by if we have more time, we should do more sophisticated engineering about this. And of course, with more background about the procedures and drugs.
Or you just run a loop of 1,000 one-parametric regression models and see what particular parameter gives you the highest impact on the metastatic prediction.
Yeah,
just to start with, yeah.
Yeah, that could be possible, but yeah, 1,000, that's a lot of work, and we don't have chance to do that. But that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. We've got time for maybe one more question from the judges, and then it'll be time to vote using Mentimeter. So judges, just check your chat. If you haven't seen it, I've chatted the link back to you, but you also got in your email the chance to vote on the 5 criteria. While we bring that up, we have time for one last question. Any judges would like to ask one more question of Team 1?
I don't have a question, Dan, but I just want to thank them for the preparations and then the slides, and the clarity of the slides. So I think the whole team. So I really appreciate it.
All right, awesome. Well, Team 1, well done. We're going to take a moment. John, if I can invite you to bring up the Mentimeter board. So scores are already coming in. So I think we just have to spotlight that. There we go. Your scores will change in front of you. We won't show that final score, but judges get those ratings in. Again, as we mentioned, there are 5 criteria: creativity, rigor, execution, clarity, and persuasion. So far, Team 1, you're looking good. Final score, that's your final scores. We're going to keep those hidden for now until the final round. But what we're going to do now, as the judges get their last votes in, is we're going to invite the next team up, which, if I'm not mistaken, is team number 4, Dr. Darwin. So Dr. Darwin, you are able to take the ball now and share your screen and get yourself set up while the judges get their last votes in. So Jean, you've got the floor, and it looks like your slides are now.
Can everybody see my slides right now?
We can see it.
Okay.
Great. You may want to test for one moment to make sure you can advance your slides.
Can everybody see it?
We can.
Okay, great.
Awesome. The floor is yours.
Yes. Hi, everyone. We're Team 4, Dr. Darwin, and now we're going to present our solutions for the Novartis hackathon today. So for each object, first we're going to present our problem definition, and then we'll follow with our data preparations and corresponding model training and results, and follow up with our discussion, which includes our summaries and limitations and future steps. So first, for our objective 1, our aim is to accurately predict when a patient will be clinically diagnosed as metastatic breast cancer. When we're facing these problems, actually the first steps we look upon is procedural code. The reason behind is we know metastatic breast cancer is phase 4. It's very late stage breast cancer. And it's very important for let us know that which patients is approaching to a late phase, which patients are the early phase of breast cancer. So it's easier for our later predictions. And so from the PX tables and for the procedure reference code we combine, we find over 6,000 unique procedure codes with corresponding different procedure descriptions. Among those descriptions, we will find these keywords to indicate if it's late phase of breast cancer, or the early phase. According to our research, we've known that if it's very close to metastatic breast cancer, which means the breast cancer is already start to move to other part of the bodies, which means the treatment gonna approaching or the indication of the diagnosis were more about immunotherapies, because doctors will probably prescribe molecular target drugs or PD-1 drugs, those gene drugs to the patients. And for the patients who has descriptions relative to surgeries or mastectomy, they're early stage because their cancer are not moved there. They're relatively small, so they can use surgery to remove it. And there is a third group, which is they are in between and they don't have those keywords as shown above. So they're in between, maybe phase 2 or phase 3 is unknown. But this is the three group we categorize for our training data. And next steps we're concerning is the drug types. After our carefully research and get advice from our mentor, we realize like all the 10 different categories of drugs are relatively the same. Their effect clinically are the same. So we put on the same weight on them, but we only categorize the group other as 0 because others implies for the treatment that is only consulting, therapy, etc. So they're not very key indicators for the phase 2 or the later stage of the treatment. And for our diagnosis descriptions, we will detect the most relevant keywords like malignant, like secondary, like very keywords. And also lympho is also very relative keywords to describe the current stage of the patient is very severe. And there's other keywords indicate the stage of the patients is relatively light. Yeah, so according to these three groups, one is our procedure description, our drug description, and diagnosis description. We sorted out and refine our data for later model training.
Hi, everyone. So now I'm going to introduce the method we vectorize each medical record for each patient in order to fit into our machine learning model. So first, we do train test splits on patient IDs to keep the information independent. And we do a time backward sampling, which is defined as follows. We cut the APLD of each patient into segments by setting time difference between the service date and the latest available dates separately on PX and RX table. The latest available dates is extra features made by ourselves, which is defined in this way. For the class 0 patients, it will just be the latest service date among all of his medical records. And for class 1 patient, it will be the date the patient became class 1. So to be more specific, for the first objective, the latest available date for the class 1 patients will be the exact date he became an MBC patient from a BC patient. And for the objective 2, the date will for the class 1 will be the date that he first received a second-line therapy. So with the help of the latest available date, we will throw all of the information of patients after they became class 1. So we treat all of the patients as currently being in class 0. Some of them will become class 1 during the next diagnosis, and some of them will not. So in this sense, we are really predicting whether a patient in class 0 will go to class 1. So to do the time backward sampling, we take all of the information for each patient until the latest available date. And we cut this information into 15 segments. And the length of each segment will be in an increasing order from 1 week, 2 weeks, and 3 weeks until 14 weeks. And the last period and the last segments will include all the information that haven't been included from the previous 14 segments. And in this way, we can get in total 15 blocks of diagnosis information for each patient. Can you switch the PPT?
Yes.
Yeah. And for each block of the information, the row just represents the number of records during that segment, and the column just represents the features. And for each block, we just take the diagnosis code, procedure code, and the NDC code, and we use the one-hot encoding that we just introduced before, and the block will become a 0-1 matrix, and each row of the matrix will be will respectively be the diagnosis vector, procedure vector, and the NDC vector. And finally, for this block, we sum along the row. So each block will be compressed into a one row vector, and we add an extra entry in the first position of the vector, indicating the number of records during that segment. And the diagnosis code will just be a 0-1 and the remaining 3 parts is the sum of the 0-1 vector of the diagnosis code and procedure code and the ND state, and their lengths are respectively 13, 11, and 9.
For now, for the second.
Sorry. This part is so for each patient we will get information matrix, and the information matrix will be the 15 row and 34 columns, and there are in total 2 matrices because they are from PX and RX matrix respectively, and we concatenate these 2 matrices together to obtain a 15 times 68 matrix. And we use neural network to train on this matrix. We use the first layer of our neural network will be a long short-term memory layer to capture the time series feature of our model. And after the LSTM layer, we use the stack of 3 convolutional layers and with 2 max pooling layers in between to see whether and this convolutional network intuitively can catch which part of the procedure, NDC, or diagnosis on which time period is more important. And after the convolutional layers, we just add 3 dense layers to classify the results. And for the fourth objective, our model gets 83.5% on the test set accuracy. Thank you.
Okay, for now, for the second objective, we would also like to know if a patient will stop reacting to the current treatment. In another word, we would like to know if a patient is likely to progress to the next line of therapy. We define the next line of therapy as a different treatment after 30 days from the first treatment record. In particular, we label those who have started with one of the drugs that belong to those 10 brands relevant to breast cancer and then receive different drug after 30 days of treatment as 1. On the other hand, we'll label those who start with one of the drugs in those 10 brands but have never changed their treatment as 0. For those who have no more than 30 days of records, we assume that they never receive a different drug. Thus, for those whose first treatment is not in one of the 10 brands or is a combination of brands, we decide to remove them in our model. Again, we use the same time backward sampling method and train a long short-term memory model along with the convolutional neural network to predict whether a patient will progress to the second line. And we feed the model with a matrix that each row represents a patient and the columns are the one-hot encoding based on the categorizations of diagnosis, procedure, and drug type we just mentioned. And the model has reached an accuracy of 79% with a sensitivity of roughly 80% and a specificity of 78%. Combining the results for these 2 objectives, we find that the most critical information we need is a weekly trajectory and the categorizations of procedures and prescription. One reason we choose to use this algorithm is because they allow us to let the model detect and learn feature automatically.
The feature we feed into the model is relatively simple. We only need to know a patient's treatment date since the first record, their previous diagnosed code, the types of drug that he or she has received, and also the previous procedure code. These have saved us a lot of effort from exploring and constructing complex features or hunting every possible piece of data that might be helpful. In addition to the long short-term memory and convolutional neural network, we actually also have tried to conduct feature engineering manually and train decision trees model. Even though the deep learning algorithm might have less interpretability when we try to understand what features might be more important compared with the traditional machine learning model, it eventually yields a higher prediction accuracy, which we think should be given a higher priority when it comes to decision making in healthcare industry. And in terms of the limitations of the current project, we highly recommend that we should gather age information while doing a prediction in breast cancer relevant topic. It is widely documented that age is an important risk factor in the diagnosis of breast cancer. Regardless of the gender difference, the older a person gets, the more likely that he or she is going to get breast cancer. And also the mortality rates of breast cancer is also very closely related to age. And moreover, if we were given more time to explore the dataset, we would like to devote more effort in generating more detailed category for the diagnosed code and also fine-tuning our model, which are critical to improve the prediction power. In a nutshell, we recommend utilizing days since the first treatment, the categorizations of patient previous drug type, diagnosed code, and the national drug code, along with our long short-term memory model, plus the convolutional neural network algorithm to better keep tracks and gain more controls of patients' data and their potential reaction to certain types of drugs, and also target the right treatment in advance with the assistance of the prediction model. And that's all our presentation today. Thank you.
Great job, the Dr. Darwin team. Well put together, but you're not off the hot seat quite yet. We do have some questions from our judges, but well done. Gellert, I'm going to come back to you to start things off again because I know you have questions for the team. So Gellert, I'm going to start with you and then we'll rotate it around to the other coaches, judges. Gellert. You may be on mute. Hold on for just one moment while he unmutes. While we're waiting for Gellert, if there are other judges that have questions, Igor, Nitin, Tatiana, Lauren, please feel free to step in, ask questions of team number 4.
Well, thank you, Dan. Yeah, I think on my side, let me ask the same question I asked before. Have you seen any predictors of the metastatic breast cancer? Any codes, any procedures, any other frequencies, anything else that you can really tell you that you can predict better progression to metastatic disease?
I'm sorry, so your question is about predictor, the indicator?
Yes. What were top indicators, top predictors? Some particular CD10 codes or some particular, let's say, right?
Yeah. So this slides, I think these slides may be helpful to explain this question. So our logic is the question is asking for when it's going to move to the metastatic breast cancer. So metastatic breast cancer is very late stage, means the cancer is already moved around to the body. So around that stage, the doctors will prescribe the drugs that more like immunotherapy. Like they have to use drugs to attack the tumor, the cancerous cells in the body. So we have to split this group out because we know this group gonna closely related to MBC very soon. So this is the first group. We pick it out among the 6,000 procedure code. And we actually view almost 6,000 procedure codes. And from each code, there are repetition and some of our irrelevant informations. But these are the key information, key words from those descriptions we pick out. That's going to be closely to the MBC stage. So we pick out these as indicator. And some our surgery, if the patient just gonna take surgery soon, it's actually imply it's very early stage of breast cancer, because only early stage is very small, even benign tumor, so you can remove by surgery, etc. So we categorize in 3 groups. So we think this is a very key indicator for when it's gonna progress to MBC.
Well, thank you very helpful. Yeah, I think you just want to add here, we have to be very careful because it's a causality issue, right? Because, for example, if it says metastatic, if it says lymph, it's already metastatic, is too late. It's after, not before. But thank you so much.
Yeah. We'll also take that into account. Yes, you're right. Yeah, thank you.
Great.
Yes, sorry, I was on mute somehow and I couldn't get it to work. I was
No
here,
problem.
so
you're back. So Gellert, we've got time for a couple more questions. Feel free to take the floor.
yeah, I mean, just to kind of piggyback on what Igor was saying, right? So I think sometimes, I mean, here we just asked, can you please predict things as accurately as possible? I mean, that was kind of the whole idea here. But periodically, here they ask us to explain things, so not just accurately, but what is the reason for moving from first line to second line? And so if that was the question, would you have done something differently, right? So here, we don't really know. I mean, I kind of see you have your 3 different kind of levels, if you will, indication of late, that you have these groupings of words and whatnot, but we don't really know the contribution of each of these things separately to the actual progression or diagnosis in objective 1. So would you have done something differently if that was the question?
I'll take the question. For this question, we adopt a deep learning method. So deep learning method, it lacks of interpretability. So, but we still achieve like 80% accuracy. So, which indicates that our classification of the procedure code, diagnosis code, and NEC, they kind of make sense, so that it can select out which patient will progress to the second line or become MBC. And if we want to see more causality, I think traditional machine learning models will be better than the deep learning models, because like regression model, they can see the causality and see the coefficients. So if we put more focus on the interpretability of the model, we will choose to like decision tree regression model.
Yeah. If you think about it, I mean, right now you kind of now have a model that explains, or gets a pretty nice accuracy. So that's great. But now you have to go and talk to doctors and tell them, like, listen, these are the things that you should be looking for, and we don't really know what those things are. And I'm not saying, because that was not really the question, right? So I'm not saying that you did something wrong here. It's just interesting. It would be interesting to see what you would do if that was the question, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And I can also add to these questions because as I have mentioned, we also did a decision tree model to compare with the neural network model. And we actually have raised the feature importance. We found out that the relatively more important factor is the previous total quantity of the drug that a particular patient have been given to, and also the first types of drug that this patient have received. And so I believe that if we are given more time, this kind of feature might be important for training and interpreting in the traditional machine learning models and give us more reasonable results.
Yeah. So we see that was the accuracy of that much worse than this model, like the random. I don't know. Did you do random forest or whatever you did?
It's only like 50%, which means just gambling rate. Much worse than the model we're.
Okay. I mean, if you could get that model reasonably close to what you are having here in terms of accuracy, then it would be very useful for us, because then you would say, not only am I accurate, but I can now do something about it, right? But yeah, and this is what's awesome. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Good questions, Geller. And we are out of time for questions for this round, but now it's time for judges for you to have your say. So we're going to go to Mentimeter and we're going to ask you guys to move into the next question. While we do that, our next team up is going to be Team 6 from New York University, Meliora. So you guys can start.
Dan, I just want to thank, be sorry to cut you off, but I really want to thank the team as well. I mean, I totally appreciate it. I know this is a data science, versus, but we are also seeing a lot of nice slides and a lot of explanations. So I definitely want to thank, especially for that effort that they put into the mix as well as the presentation flow, to this team as well. So thank you.
Agreed. Very well presented, very well shown. So right on with that. And so now consider that, judges, as you're putting your votes together for Team 4. So we'll give one moment. John, if you could bring up the voting. So votes are moving along, and we'll now hide that so we don't know where the final scores will be. Team 4 doing well. All right. Team 6 from New York University, Meliora. You guys have the floor, so we're going to turn it over to you to be able to grab the ball, and it's going to be your turn to present. So turn it over to you. The clock will start as soon as you do.
Okay.
All right, we can see your slides. Looks like you're ready to roll. You ready, Team 6?
Okay. Hi, everyone. We are Team 6, Meliora. Many of you may be curious about what Meliora means. It is actually a Latin word meaning ever better. So we would like to use Meliora to encourage ourselves to always make progress and be ever better. And now please let me introduce our excellent team members. They are Long Chen, Yuhan Gao, Zhifan Nan, and me, Yuhan Liu. So today we're going to present our project, which focused on the prediction of metastatic breast cancer. So first of all, we would like to state the two tasks in the project. First, we predict if a patient may be clinically diagnosed with MBC. And secondly, we predict if a patient is likely to progress to the second line of treatment. So in the presentation, we're going to talk about the data preparation, methodologies we used for each task, and finally, the overall limitations and implications. And now I will hand over to my teammates, Long Chen, to start the data preparation part.
Thank you. So I will talk about data preparation. So these are the general preparation procedures for both tasks. First of which, we remove all irrelevant and duplicate fields, which does not really contribute to our study. And then we process each of the three tables separately. So for diagnosis table, we label patients as BC and MBC, which stands for metastatic breast cancer, using sorry, the rules provided. And a small portion of the MBC patients actually do not have a valid BC diagnosis because they might be diagnosed before 2013, which is the start date of our data set, and they are removed for the strict rules. And then we calculate the earliest and latest diagnosis date, and then we move to calculate average number of diagnoses, and then normalize by the span of their first and last diagnosis date. We think this will be a very good baseline to measure the health condition of the patients. For procedure table, we created variables of procedures for each patient with the values, the total service amount of the procedure within the time frame. So we basically add up all the procedures and their unit of use within our data set. And for the drug table, we classify each entry into the given drug category using the rules provided, and we similarly created variables of each drug category and with their values, the total prescribed drugs within the data frame. Then we combine all the three tables into a unified one with one patient per line. So the entire data preparation and the following data feature engineering process for each task is based on the rule of preventing leaky data. The leaky data, as we define here, is those independent variables that we actually use for labeling for task 1 and 2, because we are using a very large and informative data set, and we actually deduce the label from the data set. Since our objective is to build a predictive model, inclusion of such features will leak labels. Those fields are desired to be removed for real-life practicality. Specifically for task 1, we removed generated BC diagnosis data and SN diagnosis data, and all those specific diagnosis histories, because they contain both time and uses of each diagnosis. And for task 2, we removed any prescription records after second line start date, because if we do include them, that will be kind of like a time machine where we have the data after the second line, while we actually are intended to predict whether the patient will move to second line from the first line of treatment. So next, I will yield the floor to Zhifan Nan.
Okay, now we'll move to the methodology for the task 1. The first thing we did was to do the feature engineering by using multiple methods. We first calculated the number of diagnoses for each patient. We will use diagnosis times for convenience in the following presentation, and then compared the diagnosis times for BC and MBC groups. And you can see from the histogram, the MBC patients generally have more diagnoses than BC patients. And we can go to the next. Similarly, we also calculated the diagnosis frequency, which is diagnosis times divided by the number of months since the patient was first diagnosed as BC. As we found that MBC patients was diagnosed more frequently than BC patients. So these are the features that we would like to use in a model. And after that, we figure out the importance of the diagnosis times and frequencies. We want to see if the drug's effect, what is the drug effect to predict whether the patient is MBC or not. We calculated the total number of usage of each drug for both BC and MBC groups. And more importantly, as we can see from the table on the top, we also calculated compared the usage percentage of each drug for both groups. And as we can see from the bar plot, there are 6 drugs: AFI, FAS, IBR, KIS, VR, and XL, showing a large difference between BC and MBC patients. It means that if a patient is not MBC, they didn't use certain types of drugs. So we can count drugs as another important feature in our model.
Yeah, so I'll take from there. So another feature we included is the procedure codes that each patient participated in the past in their treatment. And we found out that there are more than 6,000 codes in total. So we need to select the most informative ones to avoid the curse of dimensionality problem and also the high computational cost when we train our model later. So basically, we took 2 approaches to select 2 different sets of features. The most straightforward one is to apply the PCA analysis. And it turns out that 224 principal components that can explain almost 90% of the variation existed in the procedure data. So we can directly use them as our features. However, the problem with PCA is that it has lower interpretability, which means that we still have no idea about which procedures are more important for predicting MBC and which procedures are not that important. So next slide, please. So to solve this problem, we take another approach to find the most important procedures, which is to manually select the most important ones based on the feature importance given by the random forest model. So instead of taking all the procedures into account, we selected the top 500 most common procedures and used them as features to train a random forest model to predict MBC. And the accuracy we achieved is 60.48%. So using the feature importance returned by the random forest model, we selected the K most important procedures and used them as features to, again, to predict MBC. And we can see the learning curve in this plot. So we can see the first few features are pretty informative, but when K is greater than 10, our model does not really improve much. So we set our cutoff point to 11, and the accuracy with these 11 procedures is 60.41%, which is almost the same as the accuracy we achieved by including all the 500 procedures. So next slide, please. So until now, we finished our feature engineering part and comes to the model selection part. So basically, we have 3 feature candidates and 5 model candidates. And we want to know which combination can result in the best model performance. So the major difference between these feature candidates is that we would like to know whether should we use all the drugs in our feature set or just the 6 most informative ones. And also, we would like to know whether should we use the PCA selected procedures or versus just the 11 procedures we selected manually. So we can go to the next slide. And so with this question in mind, so we developed our basic logic behind our model selection, which is that we use K-fold cross-validation to get the average AUC score for each our model. And we select the one with the highest score. So in this case, the highest scoring model we found is the XGBoost with the 3rd feature candidate, including the diagnosis time, the frequency, all the drugs, and also the PCA selected procedures. So after having this optimal model, we use the ROC curves. Next slide, please. So after having the optimal model in hand, we use the ROC curve to find the optimal threshold for this model. And the threshold that can give us the best trade-off points between the true positive rate and the false positive rate is around 0.45. So we use this threshold to replace the default 0.5 to further improve the model's performance. So until now, we are ready to apply this model to our testing set. And the final results are shown here. Here is the confusion matrix. And the accuracy we got is around 76%. And we can see the recall is around 70%, and the specificity is about 80%. So so the text 2 is about predicting which patients will progress from the first-line therapy to the second-line therapy. So the feature engineering part of the task 2 is that after identifying all the second-line patients, we focus on the data between the start date of the first-line treatment and the second-line treatment, because this is the time period that we should care about. The feature we created include the first-line duration, the number of drugs they used during their first-line treatment, and what are those drugs, and the total amount of drugs they used. And lastly, the number of diagnosis times they did during their first-line treatment. So with this feature setup, we can go to the next slide. We basically did the same thing as we did in our first task. We used the K-fold cross-validation and the AUC score to select the best model. And the model that gives us the highest score is still the XGBoost classifier with this feature set as we shown here. And next slide, please. So this time, the optimal threshold that the ROC curve gives us is 0.53. And so we use this new threshold to replace the default 0.5 and we are ready to apply the model to our testing set. And here are the results we got. We achieved an accuracy around 76.8%, and sensitivity is around 75%, and specificity is a little bit above 78%. So next, I'll hand it over to my teammates to talk about the implication of our model.
Thank you, Zhifan. Next, what are the implications of our model? For first model, this is a valuable early diagnostic tool for medical workers. Doctors can label those highly likely MBC patients and provide them with preventative and medical attentions that could impede or delay the development of metastatic breast cancer. To illustrate, take a look at the timeline. We implement our model after the diagnosis of BC and apply preventative treatment to those labeled patients. Hypothetically, we can delay or even prevent MBC. For a second model, doctors and medical providers can take advantage of our model to predict those patients who are more likely to progress to second line. And then patients can take alternative medications to prevent so. Next slide, please. Last but not least, the limitations and the future works about our model. We try to implement a neural networks and a deep learning method that can hypothetically perform better. The performance but is not optimal, and we suspect that the size of the dataset is not large enough, and also the constraints of our hardware on hand. Also, we didn't use temporal data that trace the timelines of the patient that we could further research on. For future works, we can incorporate more data sources, such like medical data, radiology reports, and etc. Next, we can not only predict the presence of the MBC, we can predict the time of development from BC to MBC, or from first line to second line. Finally, we could research on deep learning methods if we have larger data sets. Thank you for attention.
Wow, almost right to the second for Team 6. Thank you, well done. Great presentation. Love that you gathered some implications and conclusions of how this could be clinically relevant. So awesome job, team from New York University. Judges, we're going to turn it over to you for a few moments to be able to share some of your questions with the group. So I'm going to toss it up to Igor, Gellert, or other judges to be able to ask some questions. We have 5 minutes for questions. The floor is open to you, judges, to inquire of team number 6.
And then here I would even suggest for other judges to start conversation, because it looks like we've been talking with Gellert too much for the first few teams. Thank you.
No problem. Well, so I'll open this up. Eric, Tatiana, we have quite a few others. Gary, if you guys would like to inquire questions of the group that just presented.
Here is Eric. I mean, it's not really a question, but a general comment for pretty much all the team. If it's possible, I mean, we are running all the model, which is great accuracy, but we are not really driving any insight at the end. If they can just probably at the end say, okay, this is what we do believe are the most predictive for breast cancer of patient to move from first to second line. I don't know if this was part of the exercise, but just to get some insight, not just running the model, but just some kind of quick insight from what they are seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll turn that to Team 6 for a moment. Any insights that you gleaned that you could use or apply going forward from the work that you did?
So like you have said, we can use the model to do some preventive healthcare prediction. Like we kind of, so we also said in our future work that instead of just predict the presence of MBC, we can also do some work in terms of predicting when the patient will develop MBC, or from the first line to the second line. So if the model can do that, we can know beforehand that the patient will progress from their disease, and we can do some preventive method to delay that their disease development, or just to prevent their breast cancer.
Yeah. In addition to that, our model can work as a diagnostic tool for medical workers and doctors. And since we do not include any data that after the diagnosis of MBC or second line, so we only use the present data that can be used to predict the future. So it means that this can, in reality, it is absolutely practical for doctors to apply our model to predict if the patients will be developed to second line or MBC.
Yes. I just want to add a quick point. We do discover some very interesting features that are strongly correlated with our label to predict. But one of which that is the most significant is for task 2, the first line duration. So basically, the longer the duration, the more likely the patient is going to progress to the second line. This is kind of intuitive, but with this model, we can actually have the coefficient that for a specific patient, we can kind of predict when and how long, also how long the patient will move to the second line treatment after a long duration of the first line treatment.
Thank you. We've got time for another question from a judge. So Gary, did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
Yes, I do. I raised my hand. So I do like how the team has been having a thorough framework and to think through how do they handle the process, and especially for Object 2, they're doing a really good trying to explain the cost of from first line to second line. My question is really on the Object 1. Have the team really think about for the patient who is using those drugs, when you were looking at the drugs usage as a predictor for the MBC, have you think of there's a possibility that the using of this drug itself, it is the cause of their becoming metastatic? So that's why they are using those drugs. So this using this to predict that patient is metastatic itself may not be the right predictive itself. It's after fact, basically.
Yeah.
Feel free to answer that. Someone from Team 6 or a comment if you'd like.
So yeah. So maybe that's one aspect that we need to pay attention. But it's just our findings, and we find that there's a significant difference in their usage percentage for each drug between like BC patients and MBC patients. So we don't actually know the difference between those drugs, but we can see that for some of them there's a very distinct difference between these two groups of patients. So we use them as predictive features.
Yeah, I think this is a question about causality and correlation. Yes, we are working on the correlation between the drug and the MBC, but we haven't looked at the causality, that if this drug can be a cause for those MBC. Yeah, that could be a good future works to research on.
Great, thank you. All right, well, we're out of time.
I have a very quick question. Maybe I missed it, but very good presentation. I enjoyed the presentation a lot, very informative. And I like the explanation of the trying principal components first to reduce the number of procedures, and also those 11 or using the feature method to select the 11 procedures. But maybe I missed which one in the end was used in the final model.
we can show our presentation.
Actually, it's the PCA selected features gives us the best gives us the better model performance actually.
All right.
But in terms of the interpretability, the manual selected 11 features will be better. So it can gives us the simpler model and also a more interpretable model. But PCA, we just have no idea which procedure we used. We just know that these are the principal components that are informative.
And that's the one that was used in the final model.
Yeah, that was the one in the final model.
Thank you.
All right, well, here's what we're gonna do now. We've got one more team to present. Judges, if you haven't yet voted, take a moment, put your scores in Mentimeter. John is flashing that up there right now. Scores are coming in. So we'll hide those scores now as the numbers go up or they go down. So we'll keep those coming in. Judges, get those last ones in. What we're now going to do is we're going to turn to our final team of round one. So Breast Friend, Team 10, which is our composite team from NJIT, University of Cincinnati, and Johns Hopkins. So we've got a great team here together. You guys have the floor while the judges get their last votes in. Feel free to set up your presentation, queue up your team, and the floor is now yours. The clock will start on you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ajay Ajare, the team lead for Breast Friend, and we'll be discussing our results for our hackathon project detecting metastatic breast cancer at patient therapy patient transitions through data. We hope that with this presentation that you can see how we approach the problem for these objectives and then how we were able to leverage our knowledge in order to make the best predictions for the outcomes. Let's start with Latoya. Latoya is 1 out of 200,000 patients that get diagnosed with breast cancer each year. She's also a 6%er. What we mean by 6%er is that when she went to go get her breast cancer treated, some of the breast cancer was not removed. They instead grew and became more aggressive and became metastatic breast cancer. Now, we want to be able to not only find out how patients like Latoya transition into metastatic breast cancer, but also how they transition from the lines of therapy. And so we could take a biomedical informatics approach. Quickly, what's biomedical informatics? Well, it's the combination of computers and medicine in order to come out with the best results for patients. We can leverage electronic healthcare records as well as data from clearinghouses in order to look into real-world data about patients that have breast cancer. We can then use this real-world data about breast cancer to also investigate what may make a patient transition into metastatic breast cancer, as well as what lines of therapy patients may transition from the first line to the second line of therapy. We can leverage machine learning in order to give us guidance on what may be predictive of these transitions, as well as be able to leverage the data to create the models in order to make the best predictions possible. We come to our first question, which is what identifies MBC transitions? And then our second question is what are the transitions in the second line of therapy? Well, our objectives are to predict patients that have transitioned from breast cancer to metastatic breast cancer, as well as patients that transitioned from the first to the second line of therapy. Let's think about what we used. Provided by Novartis, we took Equivia data and used Python and Jupyter with Pandas, Healthcare AI, Spacey, and sklearn. We took the data from prescription data, procedure data, and then diagnosis and combined all of these data together. Then we started cleaning the data, trying to get rid of irrelevant or duplicate data that doesn't really contribute to the model. We then use Spacey for natural language processing to look at what might be some information that's not necessarily grokked from the procedure codes. And we found things such as body parts that might be associated with the procedures. We then took it into preparing data where we leveraged healthcare AI's prep data in order to find certain variables that still will not be varied enough in order to create the best model. We prepared this data and put it into sklearn, where we did a test train split with the test split of 0.25 and the random parameter of 42. We then used this data for 4 different techniques, including regression analysis, random forest, neural network, and extreme gradient boosting. What were the covariates that we then found that would help out for objective 1? Well, we saw diagnosis codes, procedure codes, and underneath those procedure codes, we saw body parts that were associated with these procedure codes. Then we also synthesized seasonal data as to see whether or not some seasonal effects may affect patients for treatment. Then we had metastatic breast cancer and breast cancer patient identification. For the lines of therapy for objective 2, we synthesized first line, second line of therapy, breast cancer treatment medications that were given to us by the prescriptions, as well as days on treatment, and then again, metastatic and breast cancer patient labeling. What worked? Well, random forest was considered the best model for our objective with a test accuracy about 97, and the contributing factors were seasons, body parts such as blood, bone, and lungs, which I'll go to later. Medication was a contributing factor, as well as the procedure codes in the data. I want to take a quick moment to just focus on the body parts and for metastatic breast cancer. As this chart shows, there's a lot of counts and there's overlaps. And if you look in the middle, there's lung and there's some overlaps between metastatic breast cancer. That's because when metastatic breast cancer starts growing and targeting, the first area it targets is the lungs. And so having that overlap and understanding it may give us better insight as to how to approach patients when seeing their transition from breast cancer to metastatic breast cancer. We then did extreme gradient boosting. Test accuracy was 0.99, and there are multiple contributing factors such as days on the first line of treatment, Ibrance, letrozole, and Xeloda. We found out that the ensemble methods performed the best. They had the best sensitivity, they had the best specificity, and they gave a probable accurate model for the data with some caveats, which I'll mention in the limitation. We then looked at the time-based data and saw that seasonal data had some impact on objective 1. And then we saw that for time on the first therapy also had some impact on the prediction model for objective 2. We then said, we've built these models, maybe there's some causal inferences that we can do. What is causal inference? We normally have correlation data where we say one thing correlates to another. Causal inference tries to see if one variable indicates a transition or the causing of another variable's shift. And so from our analysis, so far we were not able to find variables that had a causal effect on the outcome variables. We had, of course, limitations, and one of the biggest limitations is health data sparsity. To be mindful, all of the participants are very aware that we had a lot of data, but not a lot of data to actually really work with. A lot of the data generated created spurious information. When you're trying to feature engineer, it didn't necessarily give us the right amount of parameters that could be able to create a pattern. And that's because data is very unique for health. Data can be synthesized and very scaled from continuous labels to discrete labels. And so you get sparse data from health data, especially from those in clearinghouses. We didn't have patient comorbidity in previous health history. This is very important because the way in which patients are treated are dependent on their patient's history and what they have, as well as being mindful of what may work and what may not for treatments during the process of curing breast cancer. Speaking of breast cancer, we didn't have breast cancer types. We didn't have knowledge of triple negative breast cancer types. We didn't have knowledge of the BRCA1 gene if they were apparent in some of these patients. We grokked some of the information that could give us hints about it, but we did not pursue these hints because there's not enough information and contextualization in order to be certain that they were apparent. Finally, we didn't have demographic data. While we had pay data, which could have infer a bit about demographics, such as if it was from Medicare, Medicaid, or self-paid, that's not enough to look at patients, whether it's their age, their race, where they're located, which can play a major part. A patient in New Jersey, which has a high cancer incidence rate, may have different prognosis and treatment progression compared to those in cancer area of Louisiana, or in Idaho, Missouri, or in the great state of Ohio. So what did we learn as our predictions? Well, our conclusions are that we predicted metastatic breast cancer with seasonal data, medication data, body part data, with procedure codes that factor into the association of these models. We were able to predict the transition to second line of therapy with phase on therapy, certain drugs, Xeloda, and letrozole, and that gave us the transitions. And these models can help patients like Latoya. We're hoping that with these models, they can be able to improve our knowledge of treatments for patients like Latoya and identify what may be markers of metastatic breast cancer so that patients, again, like Latoya, are not faced with the difficult response of you have breast cancer that has become metastatic and that there's only so many years to live, and that with it, we can say that we have the treatments to make sure that your breast cancer is fully eradicated, thus helping all breast cancer patients. Thank you very much. Questions?
All right. Well done, AJ and your entire team. And if there's anything I take away from this presentation, that I need to pack my bags and move out of New Jersey quickly. So thank you for that presentation. Now we're going to turn to the judges. Judges, last presentation for this round. The floor is yours. Narai, Igor, Gellert, and the rest of the team, feel free to raise your hand or jump in and ask the question.
Dan, I just want to give an opportunity to the rest of the team just to say hi, at least to everyone, while the other judges are preparing for their questions.
Absolutely. I could see some of the team members on right now as well. Feel free to say hello, team members from team number, from the Breast Friend team. Or if you're muted or camera shy, that's fine too. While we do that, we're going to open up the floor to the judges. Judges, the floor is yours again to ask any questions of the team.
Hi, this is Lauren. I have a question regarding to the first objective of this team is doing. So they're using body part as one of the features to predict metastatic breast cancer. But how did they get the body part from our data? Is that like the tumor site in the body?
So we synthesized the body parts from the procedure code and some of the diagnostic codes from our natural language processing techniques, which I would love to show you all, but unfortunately I don't have sharing permissions right now. We first saw some of the body parts that were appearing in the procedure codes that were very, very sparse in what they were coming from, but then we were able to kind of categorize them into three quick categories, such as these ICD codes and procedure codes are more linked towards sites on the breast or on the bone. And these features we can then use in order to actually create the more effective model based upon the parameters.
So basically, to your point, it's just the body part, meaning where the tumor is at from the diagnosis code.
Yes, but also if they had a procedure that was there, that was based upon the body parts. So there also are procedures that were, of course, for diagnostics like tumor antigens, which we incorporated into our blood parameter, which may have been a way of testing to see whether or not they have to be transitioned into the second line of therapy or into the metastatic breast cancer categorization.
Okay. And I also have another question for you. Like, after your analysis, do you find any suggestions to the users of your model, saying like, what will be the implication for your first model to identify metastatic breast cancer?
Yes. So what we would say for our model is that we found that there are certain ICD codes that are going to be trending more towards metastatic, or procedure codes are going to be trending towards metastatic breast cancer, and that you should be very mindful of seasonal transitions, as they may affect the fact that a patient is about to transition. Maybe not a lot, but of course, medications may be used if it's in the winter time, which then means that they're going to get a lot sicker easily. We also can say that in our diagnosis, that patients should be paid attention to for lung capacity, that if they're having issues with breathing or some breathing issues that might be apparent, that this might be the indication that they need to be assessed for metastatic breast cancer transition.
That is interesting finding. Yeah, I think I just want to share my thank you to all the team members. I think during the whole process, your presentation, we are learning from you as well. Being in the industry for a long time, like a lot of your ideas are new to us, and we may be able to apply in our future work. Thank you, teams.
I just want to add a quick point. Like during handling the data set, we found that there are so many duplicates. So we also add, and the data is very huge. So we are trying to reduce the dimension of the data. So we kind of like manually choose the high frequency of the diagnosis code and this code and other variable, which is the with the procedure code. So we didn't put this in our presentation because of time limitation, but yeah, we'll make this data set more memory friendly and smaller.
Great. One more question from the judges.
Yeah. So this is Dan again, and hopefully you can actually see my face now. so I have two quick questions. So one is, again, very interesting presentation. The accuracy scores were really high for both procedures, right? For the random forest and extreme gradient boosting. I saw very different contributing factors, very different top contributing factors in both methodologies. Any thought about why those contributing factors were very different?
So I would like to answer it. I can, but I'm going to let Francis give some of his insight, and then I will come in if I feel like I need to inject any more.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So, you mentioned there's a list of contributing factors, right, in both methodologies. The first one, random forest, if I remember correctly, and then the extreme gradient boosting. I just wanted to understand why, the top contributing factors seem to be very different in both methodologies.
We used random forest, and actually we used many other models, not just random forest, but the accuracy we got, actually they are the same. Like they're very close. So I think this is also a problem of our data set. Like in our data set we have a lot of like duplicates. So so yes, I think I think this is kind of like a limitation of our research.
And then let me just jump in. I think that with the medications, and particularly with Objective 2, that we saw that certain medications were pretty much triggering the parameters that essentially all the other major parameters that we synthesized from Objective 1 weren't necessarily all that good. For instance, we realized that Ibrance came up, and the reason why that's interesting is because Ibrance is assigned with HR plus breast cancer. And then also for our analysis, we also found that Xeloda was popping up. And we found out that Xeloda is actually a second line therapy in the UK, approved for that. So it would make sense that that would pop up. Now, as for the first one, the reason why those contributing factors may have been different from the other ones is because we have a lot more data, though still very sparse to play with, which then allowed us to have a little bit more features contributing to the model that could make us more knowledgeable about how to do the prediction.
I see. Okay, that explains. And then the second question, you mentioned causality, right? That you were testing for causality for some of the causal relationships, and nothing seems to be significant. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on what type of factors were tested for that causality?
Great question. The answer are the model contributing factors that we had. So the seasonal data, days on the treatment, the various medications, the body parts, frequency. We went through and did causal analysis in order to see whether or not these particular features were indicative of the transition to metastatic breast cancer or the transition to the second line of therapy. And we could not have a value that showed that there was a causal inference so far. Now, I want to be very clear. This could easily be because A, we don't have enough horsepower, which is of course a cheap way of saying, you know, we only work with what we had. But more importantly, we don't have enough data to play around with in order to make the causal inferences so far. Again, just be very understanding that we know that age plays a part in breast cancer. We didn't have that. We didn't have a lot of data history considering from all the other places. We had some data, of course, generated from Equivia, but not enough to be able to say, well, we can make a causal inference based upon these data. And then also, I would just keep in mind that the switch from ICD codes may have also played a part in the interference of the causality, but I think that's a very, very, very minor part.
All right, thank you.
All right, well, we are right at time. And what I'm going to ask is for our judges, one more time for round one, to cast your votes. So please make sure you cast your votes. And while you're doing that, I just want to take a moment to also say thanks to the entire Team 10, the Breast Friends, AJ, of course, Eves from JHU, from Johns Hopkins, Chowdakarn from NJIT, and Francis or Shao King from NJIT. So great job, guys, and thanks everybody for your involvement. Okay, well, voting is going. John, how are we doing on voting here? All right, votes are going, they're moving, and we're gonna cut from there, and we're now going to tell you what's coming up next. So up next, we are going to take a few-minute break, and we're going to go to round two. Our remaining three teams will have their say. So go grab a drink, grab a snack, get comfortable, because we're not done yet. We've got three more teams, and I think it's going to heat up even further. So John, we're going to cut to break, and everybody go grab yourself a snack and some water and hydrate. We're going to get restarted in just a few moments. 5 minutes time.
When I look into your eyes, it's like watching the night sky or a beautiful sunrise. Oh, there's so much they hold. And just like them old stars, I see that you've come so far to be right where you are. How old is your soul? Well, I won't give up on us, even if the skies get rough. I'm giving you all my love. I'm still looking up. And when you're needing your space to do some navigating, I'll be here patiently waiting to see what you find. 'Cause even the stars, they burn. Some even fall to the earth. We got a lot to learn. God knows we're worth it. No, I won't give up. I don't want to be someone who walks away so easily. I'm here to stay and make the difference that I can make. Our differences, they do a lot to teach us how to use the tools and gifts we got here. We got a lot at stake. And in the end, you're still my friend. At least we did intend for us to work. We didn't break, we didn't burn. We had to learn how to bend without the world caving in. I had to learn what I got and what I'm not and who I am. I won't give up on us, even if the skies get rough. I'm giving you all my love. I'm still looking up, still looking up. Well, I won't give up on us. God knows I'm tough. He knows we got a lot to learn. God knows we're worth it. I won't give up on us, even if the skies get rough. I'm giving you all my love. I'm still looking up.
All right. Well, I think we're just about ready for the second round, round two. So we're coming on back, and I think we have a pretty exciting group coming up for you. So our next three teams will be teams 12, 7, and 3. And we're going to be starting with team 12 first, which is called Sozo. So Sozo from Columbia University, we are going to cede the floor over to you guys so you can kick things off for the next round. Feel free to take the ball and share the screen, and we'll start the clock on you guys just when you're ready.
Hey, Augustine, can you put in the presentation mode? Thank you. Hello, everyone. We're very happy to kick off round 2 of the Great Oncology Hackathon. This is Team Sozo, and we're made up of Chelsea, Elaine, Augustine, Judah, Shayu, and Wenjie from Columbia University. So before we start, I would like to bring up an important quote. There is no cure for stage 4 metastatic breast cancer, but there is a life after this diagnosis, from Stacy Hansen, an MBC patient. With that in mind, we would like to discuss the clinical background of MBC. MBC, or metastatic breast cancer, is when breast cancer spreads through the lymph nodes to other parts of the body. And treatment largely depends on the breast cancer having the following receptors: estrogen and progesterone, which are hormones, and HER2, a growth factor that's needed in cell division, especially in cancer. Depending on the receptors that the breast cancer has, the medical team must combine the following: surgical intervention, radiation, hormonal therapy, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, or targeted therapy, depending on the receptors the breast cancer has. This leads us to our objectives for this hackathon. To improve the quality and speed of care, we utilize data analysis to accurately predict the following. Number 1, when a patient may be clinically diagnosed with MBC, or 2, when a patient is likely to progress to the next line of therapy, or when the current treatment is no longer effective.
Now we move on to the methodology of our models. First, we need to clean the data to apply our models to. And for objective 1, what we did with the data is we took the diagnosis data, and then we apply the diagnosis codes for breast cancer related diagnoses, and we apply the definition of the MBC versus non-MBC. And so for each patient, we extracted their diagnosis state, breast cancer diagnosis states, and their MBC diagnosis states for the breast cancer patients. We have a sample of that on the right-hand side there. And for prescriptions data, we grouped the drugs by the 10 brands that were offered to us. And we dropped the unrelated features. There was a modifying text that we deemed unnecessary. And for the procedures, we also kept the procedures that corresponded to drug administrations. For this objective, we just chose the administration of drug procedures for each patient ID. And we have a sample of that on the right-hand side where we see the service dates and the drugs administered. And once we got the clean data, we aggregated it weekly for each patient. So this is an example of what we would do for each patient. If this patient, for example, on the slide here had 2 drugs that she took, then we aggregated per week. We divided the time, the first service date and the last service date into bins of weeks. And we put 1 for drug A if she was on that medication for each week, and for each drug brand. And so that's why we have this plateau looking plot on the bottom here for drug A, blue, and drug B, orange. And then we also extracted some data from this, some features from this, one of which is the sum of drugs. So how many weeks did this person have drug A? And how many weeks did this person have drug B? And also we took the cross term part, we multiplied the 2 sums for each drug brand. And also we pair of them. And then we also counted the plateaus, how many plateaus are there, which indicates the number of continuous uses of drugs. And for the prediction method for our model, actual model, we applied 2 models. And how we interpreted this objective and the prediction is at the end service date, we applied the model for each patient ID such that at the end of the service date, we predict whether this person was MBC or not, given the data previously. And we applied a neural network model called the multi-layer perceptron MLP classifier. And we use this because it captures non-linearity of the data. And what it does is it takes the input features, the data we put in there, and then we apply what are called activation functions. And for that activation function, we chose what's called a logistic function that ranges from value 0 to 1, 0 indicating not MBC, 1 indicating MBC, and it's a non-linear function, so it captures non-linearity of the data. And then we also applied the simple linear regression model. although the data is probably nonlinear, highly nonlinear, we chose this because it gives us coefficients that show what are the important factors, indicator factors for MVC.
Hi, everybody. So for objective 2, first we want to, so for the objective 2, we want to predict when a patient will move to line 2 treatment. So first of all, we want to define line 1 treatment starting date as the first month of the treatment. And then the line 2 starting date is the first date after line 1 treatment ended. So then what we want to do is to collect features for every patient from the procedures, prescriptions, and diagnosis table. So from the prescription and procedures table, so we assign drug brands to the drugs and aggregate them and group by patients and their treatment periods. And then from the procedures table exclusively, we keep the top 300 most frequent procedures. We choose that number is because this, if you include more procedures, the model will generally perform better. But if you include more, for example, if we include more than 300, then the model wouldn't generally increase its performance, but the dimension has increased. So we want to keep it at that. And then we also want to group it by patient ID and treatment. And finally, to use our diagnosis table, we want to just simply group it by patient ID. So if you take a look at the table on the right, it is a sample of our finally prepared table. Although if you took a look at the second column, you have to do some encoding, but this is a kind of finally prepared table. So moving on to model selection, the first thing we're going to do is define a target. So we define 0 and 1 as such. So 1 is starting line 2 treatment within 3 months of line 1, and 0 is starting line 2 treatment after 3 months. So we do that using two perspectives. So from a practical perspective, we might care more about the patients that would pay the recent visit. And also we think there's no need to distinguish between, for example, this week and that week, since there's already a lot of randomness to it. Then from a model performance perspective, our model cannot learn finer categories. For example, a model really can tell between a 6-month period and a year period. So after we define our targets, we want to do some cross-validation using several models. We choose these models based on their accuracy and their speed. So if you take a look at the cross-validation scores, they are kind of similar to each other. So, so our model doesn't really vary it a lot based on the subset of the sample, subset of the training set. And if you look at the mean, the scores are kind of similar to each other, but after hyperparameter tuning, we find that a random forest classifier gives us the highest mean cross-validation score at the bottom.
So we move to the findings and limitations of our models. First, we did some actually statistics on the data, on drug data. We calculated the duration of the data of the drugs. So for how long did, on average, the patients take these drug brands? We actually did this for sort of a sanity check of after our models will produce results, because we are aware that longer duration drugs are used commonly for early stages of breast cancer, whereas shorter duration drugs are used mostly for later stages MBC cancer patients. And we found that to be true. In the next slide, we can see. So in the process of accomplishing objective 1, we plotted this frequency of drug brand use plot. So for MBC patients, how many times was each of these drug brands used versus just BC patients? And you can see some of them are more used for MBC patients. For example, IBR and FAS and AFI. And if you go to the slide back, you can see that that is the case. The shorter duration drugs, AFI, and also KIS, I didn't mention, but it's there too. But when we did the objective 1, next slide, please. We found for MLP about 70% accuracy, but high specificity, 95%. And the linear regression had lower accuracy, but also equally a high specificity. And what I want to mention is the features that it gave for being the highest weight was the combination of these drugs. So the model picked out a combination of the right drugs AFI, for example, AFI and IBR and AFI and LDT and others had high weights. And those you can see and confirm that they are mostly used for MBC patients, as you can see on the right plot, and also what that was mentioned in the previous slide. Some limitations are low sensitivity. First, I think it's because we had more data on the breast cancer patients, not MBC patients. So I think that's why it's low sensitivity for both models. And also a limitation is that MLP neural network is an obscure classifier, meaning we don't know what the actual features are the most important.
So for objective 2, we basically trained 2 kinds of models. So for model on the left, you can see that we used all the data we have. We used the model including the line 2 data. So this model is impractical because in practice, we wouldn't use the data from line 2 to predict the line 2 starting date. But at least it gives us an idea of our overall performance if we include all the data possible. So here you can see that from the classification report table, our precisions, recall, and F1 scores are kind of similar to each other. In accuracy, they're all around 80%. So now if we move on to the table on the right, is the model we use without line 2 treatment data. And to our surprises, the model performance doesn't really drop that much. And in fact, if you look at some of the metrics, it even improved a little bit. But overall, the scores are still around 80% and is kind of robust. So to put into perspective, a baseline model would have an accuracy of 0.61. So this is because the classes are imbalanced and there's 61% of the patients would come within 3 months. So if you just predict every patient that will start in line 2 within 3 months, that would have a score of 0.61. So our model increases the performance by 34%. So one nice thing about linear logistic regression and random forest is that you can take a look at the feature importances. So from the table, we can see that the important features are a mixture of the times of some procedures, the drug quantities, and the appearance of some of the drugs. So to sum up, some strength of our model include a decent and robust score. So recall that when you look at a cross-validation score, they're kind of similar to each other. And for all the metrics, they're all around 80%. And then the second thing is practical implementation. So just based on the data in the month of the line 1 treatment, we can make a pretty accurate prediction of whether the patient would come back in 3 months. And the third strength is fast. The model is really easy to train. It's super fast and it's super fast to predict. So some limitations for our model include in that, so as mentioned before, performance drops with final categories of dates. So the model wouldn't really learn a perspective. So this leads us to the second limitations. So the improvements can be made on the part of feature engineering. So with more domain knowledge, we'll be able to probably get better features. So that would enhance our model a little bit.
We would like to conclude this presentation by bringing back to Stacy's word at the beginning of the presentation. MBC has no cure, but there is a life after diagnosis, and that is contingent on improving MBC care. During our data analysis, we saw that certain combination of drugs had the highest coefficients, and these were contingent on the receptors that the cancers were positive for. And this led us to future directions that this project could lead to. Can we optimize how fast physicians can determine when to switch to another line of treatment? And how can we utilize the procedures and the dosage of drugs in the models that we developed in the past 2 weeks to get closer to more accurate results and improve care for MBC patients? Any questions?
Thank you. Great job, Team Sozo. And we're going to turn to our judges to be able to ask some questions. So I'm going to open it up. Judges, feel free to raise your hand on the participant menu to do raise hand, or jump in, ask a question. Clock starts, and judges, the floor is yours.
Hi, this is Lauren again. Thank you, team, for the presentation. And I like the way you try to use the simple model. You didn't try to go to the fancy way, but try to basically be able to explain the model with and also get all the significance of the features. One question regarding to your objective 2, you choose 3 months as the cutoff when you are doing the prediction. So why did you choose 3 months?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we did a lot of trials and errors, and basically the reason that we choose 3 months is that it balances the data a little bit. So we can choose, for example, 1 month and 2 months, and that the model would generally perform better, but it will perform slightly worse for when it comes to the patients that will come in like maybe later. So that is one reason, and the other reason is I think that from a practical perspective, we might want to care about patients that come in like maybe not just in this month, but probably including a period where it's reasonable to prepare more for those patients. So I think 3 months is a kind of a good cutoff.
So basically you got the 3 months after you do the analysis with all the patients' progression, and then you found the 3 months is a good cutoff when you are trying to use the model.
Right, and yeah, I think, and also like the balance is really important because we can get a higher accuracy score if the data set is imbalanced, but the first is that we want to do something like 50%, but a month would be like 2.5 months, which doesn't make really much sense from a practical perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So we
want to make a follow-up question on this. Did you observe different length of the timing when the patients progress from one line to the second with different treatment, like different drug or different? Did you observe that?
So can you repeat the question?
So you choose 3 months when you analyze across all the patients, right? But
right.
Did you observe different patient groups when they are taking different therapy? The duration of their line of therapy. Did you consider the different treatment as one factor when they are switching line of therapy? It's okay if you, because I would want to let you know for the future, you can consider like when the patients are taking different therapy, the length of therapy on each line will be different. Maybe you can use that variable as a category when you are predicting.
Yeah, right.
All right, thank you.
Great. All right, still we've got time for a question or more. Other judges would like to ask questions of the team.
Hi everyone. This is Dan again. I also like the idea of using more complex model and simple model. However, I would say it's an interesting choice for linear regression because we're talking about binary outcome variable, right? So it's predicting a variable, right, that is 0 and 1. And my understanding is that you probably are trying to predict that, right? And you get a score, and if that score is higher than 0.5, then you assign that to as 1, right? And then if it's below 0.5, then it's then you say it's not predicting. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what we did.
Okay, but so there are other simple models that might work maybe a little bit better with binary outcome variables, right? That could still be relatively simple to interpret.
Yeah, we thought also of logistic regression because the binary or logistic regression, we tried it also, but we thought it was simpler also to have this linear model which really inputs linear weights on the different cross-term products we added to our data.
And the other question I have really quickly, I thought was kind of interesting because, you can then interpret the results, and I like the graphics. I thought it was kind of interesting that in the graphics, the labels were not, it was just codes, right? but not descriptive ways to bring in more insights, right? What are the highly predictive factors when we actually list descriptive, then we can start a little bit thinking about, more in terms of that interpretability, right? Instead of just, showing the numerical codes. So I think that's like a comment, in general. I think as we're thinking about, interpretability, right? It's useful to actually also bring in, to make it as simple as possible to interpret. But thank you. It was a good presentation.
We actually have one more question, but before we have Gary ask that question, judges, cast your ballot in Mentimeter. So Mentimeter is now open, and we've got time for one more question. Gary, the floor is yours.
Yes, I really like the presentation from the team. So one question I have is, by judging from what you have shown, you have shown that the BC patient and the MBC patient is quite unbalanced in the sample. When you're doing the model, have you considered any methods trying to tackle this unbalanced sample issue?
Yeah, I can answer that. So one method we use is called a SMOTE method. So this is, for example, if we have a 60-40 imbalanced data set, then it will create more samples. It will create artificial samples for the minorities case. They're just convex artificial samples, creating for the minority case to increase the sample size.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. Well, voting is up. John, if you have a moment to share, we've got votes in, and we're now moving on to the next team as the votes are still going in and out. All right. So now we're ready for our team from Rutgers University, Team 7. So Team 7, also called NB6. I'm guessing that's New Brunswick 6, but maybe I'm just over-interpreting. NB6, the floor is now yours. Please feel free to grab the screen share and put your slides up, NB6.
Hello, everyone.
Slides are up.
Thank you, Daniel. Hi, everybody. Here is Team 7 and B6, and we are in New Brunswick, actually. Yeah, and here's our team member Guangyang, Han, Shangshan, Shengjie, Shufei, and Siqi. Oh, sorry. Well, there are two objectives in our project, and the first one is predict the patient who might be clinically diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, and objective two is predict the line of therapy. And I is going to talk about the objective one of our work. Well, in objective one, I will talk about it in 4 parts. The first part is our problem statement. The second part is data preprocessing. The third part is model fitting. And the fourth part is finding. And well, here is the problem statement. The main issue is to make prediction on patient to detect the presence of metastatic breast cancer. So we define this model as a binary classification problem, and we define the patient who got MBC as 1 and the other patients as 0. And here is the variable selection. And here I want to mention about the first variable. We introduced this new variable as mean difference, and it's the time that records how long since the patient first confirmed breast cancer. The reason we use this variable is that as the patient confirmed the breast cancer, the probability of having breast cancer will increase over time. So we want to introduce this to check if a patient will has a high probability to get the MBC if she got the breast cancer for a long time. And we also choose the diagnosis code and diagnosis word type. The combination of these two variables will indicate a specific symptom. So we introduce this into our model and we try to find if a certain symptom will affect the patient's disease and to check if it will increase the probability of getting metastatic breast cancer. And the next is the data preprocessing. Well, there are 20,000 patients in our data, and I pick one of those here, and he got multiple medical records. And from the definition of the breast cancer and metastatic breast cancer, I can find the first 0 and first 1, you see. So between the 0 and 1, he also relabeled them as 0, and after that, after the 1, we label them 1. And we drop the other that is not labeled between these two, and we will put them into our model. And the next is we will going to dummy the variable like the diagnosis code, version types, and NDC. So after we dummy these variables, our matrix will add the dimension of our data will multiply increase, but our data will be very sparse. So it's a perfect data for our next model because our, okay, I can move and go back here later. And then we're going to split the data into training set and testing set. And here's many patients. We split the patient into testing and training into 70% to 25%. And then we got the red patient, they are testing. And okay, here's the training. We got 915,000 training data and 301,000 testing data. And we are going to use XGBoost as our model. And here I want to mention that in the last slide, we made our data into a sparse data. And then we are going to use the random projection first. Random projection is a dimensional reduction method that could make our model into a small data set, and that will increase the computational time. So after random projection, we use XGBoost. And here is our result. And regard the accuracy would be 0.69, the sensitivity will be 0.79, and the specificity will 0.55. And then here is our conclusion on objective 1. And our model could correctly predict 70% of the patient with disease data. And our model could predict 80% of patients who got the MBC. And only 50% of non-MBC patients are identified. And we found the limitation of this objective is that an MBC and BC patient might have the same symptom. So it's currently different to differentiate clearly between the MBC and the BC patient. Okay, and the objective 2 would be presented by Shan.
Thank you, Guoyang. Thanks to all panelists for your time. For objective 2, we're supposed to determine when would the patient progress from first line to second line. We view them as the binary classification problems with 2 classes. From the response 0, it represents the first treatment, and response 1 as the second treatment. Meaning like whichever day the patient was receiving the same treatment as first line, we will mark them as 0, and otherwise will be marked as 1. For the reasons that almost all patients eventually progress to the second line treatment. So we have actually a very imbalanced data pool. So we have tried several methods to balance them out. Like first is that the first treatment change, and all the time we only consider the first time that the treatment has changed, and all other data time when they revisit the first treatment, first line treatment. And the other method we use is to document all and evaluate their treatments. And we have different methods to deal with brand. Brand is used to differentiate the first and second line treatment. The data of the same day were grouped together, and we have considered the brand labeled as other not relevant, so we have dropped that. Next. Yes. Like we have used given parameter to partition the unique patient ID into test and training set, but we include all those features. Duplicates are also dealt with, so we use random forest to build a baseline, but that's actually what the what model we choose to go out further. But we also tried on XGBoost to the parameter a little, but the result is not that different. This is a graph of how we dealt with brand. The brand labeled as other were not considered in the first line treatment. Next slide, please. Yeah, for the result, we find out that for random forest would give us a very satisfactory result. We choose random forest to begin with for its tolerance for different data types, and it's not very sensitive for hyperparameters, so it's easier for tuning them. And it's also very good for like those correlated features, like the diagnosed code and the NDC that we kept in the model that has some correlation with the brand. As a result, that we see we can predict 77% of the treatment status. For that model, we actually only have to use the brand alone. That will give us a very good result. And we consider other possible combinations. Like if we manipulate those NDC data and diagnosis codes, we can actually like achieve a higher sensitivity but a lower specificity. Thank you all.
All right. Great. Thank you for the presentation. And now you're not off the hot seat quite yet, MB6. We still have questions from our judges. Judges, it's now your turn to ask questions. I'm going to turn it over. Gary has his hand up first. He's the quickest to get it up there. Gary, floor is yours for a question for MB6.
Yes, first of all, I like how the team is defining the problem they're trying to solve. So, and they actually choose a clear time frame to define it's this within this time frame we want to make this prediction. I do have actually more of a clarification question over there, because if I remember correctly, in the data set we have about 20K of patients, but in your matrix, confusion matrix, that number of the true positive, true negative is way over that 20K. So are we predicting at the patient level, or are you predicting at each of the transaction or record level?
It's actually a combination of patient and their treatment dates. We group the same date together, and then like the test and training were partitioned by patient ID, but the whole data set were actually like each day we have a one line they might have multiple records. We find a way to combine them together as one record.
Okay, that's clear.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gary. Questions are still open. Judges, other questions for NB6?
Hi, everyone. Interesting presentation. One question I have, you have mentioned a limitation or an observation that MBC and BC patients are hard to differentiate. Could you elaborate a little bit more on how that relates to the to this work, like to modeling, specifically how that impacts the results?
Oh, yes. Well, for the BC patient, we saw their diagnosis code and the version type, and some symptoms in the BC patients are also appears in the MBC. So in this case, if we took one MBC patient's records into our model, and if his symptom is similar to those BC patients, and that might be our model will predict those patients as BC, and it will produce a false negative. So it's a very very hard to predict it actually.
So basically, it impacts directly the accuracy of the model.
Yeah.
Of the prediction. Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
We still have time for another question. In the meanwhile, while we're waiting for one more judge, if you have another question, it's time to vote. So John will be moving the Mentimeter poll up so that judges can start casting their ballots. But while you do, more questions still from the judges. You have time to ask another question for MB6. We'll leave the floor open in case any other questions arise to the team. Tatiana has one more question for you. So MB6, you're not off the hot seat yet. Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Hey guys, thanks for the presentation. I really like the clarity of it. I thought it was, it was simple, but it was straightforward. It was easy to understand and follow. My question is more about the model choice. So you sort of stated that you used XGBoost for the first objective and then random forest for the second one, and then you presented the confusion matrix. I'm wondering, have you compared multiple models to each other and selected the ones that you've mentioned in your presentation, or did you sort of like decide, okay, we're just going to go for these two? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, before I decide to use XGBoost, I also tried the random forest, logistic regression, and neural network. And finally, I prefer the XGBoost is that the first thing is the computational time will less than the other models. That's the first thing. The second thing is I also look through some literatures, and their result is that between different models, they have a similar accuracy and a similar sensitivity. But in the accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity, I would prefer to choose the higher sensitivity because the MBC is a very serious disease, and I don't want any of those will miss in our prediction. So I prefer to use XGBoost.
So you'd rather pick out the false positives, but you don't want to miss out on potentially those who could be falsely identified as negative, but in reality could be diagnosed.
Yes. Yes.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, it looks like everything, the votes are coming in. Judges, if you haven't cast your ballots yet, please put them in. And we see the scores are moving. They're moving up. They're moving down. So they're not, the die is not set yet. Thank you, John. But we do have one more presentation, our final presentation of round 2. And that's going to be Team Affinitor, Team 3. So we have saved you guys to bring us home. Team Affinitor, feel free to take the screen and share your slides, and then we will start the clock on you.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Hello guys. So Pritika, you need to be a little louder.
Well, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So hello, we are Team 3 Affinitor from Columbia University, and we're going to be talking about this breast cancer and the 2 problem statements. I'm sorry, Rahul, the slides are not changing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is the agenda. We're going to give a small overview about breast cancer and talk more detail about the 2 problem statements. And so first, I'm going to tell some facts about breast cancer that will emphasize the alarming statistics of it. And it seems appropriate to do so given that it is the Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So firstly, breast cancer is the 2nd most common cause of death by cancer and is the most common cancer among women worldwide. Also, this year in the US, it is predicted that around 1 in 8 women and 1 in 883 men will develop breast cancer. Now, the number for men, albeit small, is still important because they are most prone to misdiagnosis. And out of these numbers, around 6 and 9% of women and men respectively will progress to metastatic breast cancer, which is the most advanced stage wherein the cancer cells migrate to the other parts of the body. And you can understand its severity given that one of the most important characteristics of metastatic breast cancer is that it easily becomes resistant to drug therapies. So we have to try and predict when we have to change the line of therapy. Now I'll let my teammate continue further about the problem statement.
Hello guys. So thank you, Pritika. So the 2 problem statements which we have right now to consider are the accurate. One is to accurately predict when a patient may be clinically diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, and the other one is to accurately predict when a patient is likely to progress to the next line of therapy. So for the 2 problem statements, we have actually the data sets given where have very similar data structure and data architecture. The only thing changing among the 2 are the values. So I would like to emphasize on the in the first problem statement, all the pre-processing and everything we have done, and we'll be skimming a little faster in the second problem statement. So in the first problem statement, one of the biggest challenges was identification of the MBC and the BC non-MBC patients. For that purpose, Novartis team helped us and gave us a clear-cut definition on to choose the difference. If the difference is greater, that difference between the minimum date diagnosed with breast cancer and the minimum date diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer is greater than -30, we will consider them as an MBC patient. So one more thing I would like to point out about the data is that it contains time series data. It contains time element, and it contains it contains multiple patients and lot of time related data for each of the patient. So what we intended to do is we tried to club them such that each patient has one row, and we aim to so we do that because we aim to do this using performing extensive feature engineering and categorization to incorporate all the information from multiple dates and multiple patients into one row. So what we essentially want to achieve is one row for each patient. So if we have 20,000 rows in our data, 20,000 patients, so we'll have 20,000 rows in our final model training data set. So one of the things which we want to achieve is that we want to develop why we decided to go for machine learning and this kind of categorization and grouping is that we wanted to develop a model which would be very easy to deploy, which would be easy to understand, and also at the same time it should be easily be applicable, reapplicable to all the new patients, and if you want to apply to the any new data. So the first thing to achieve this, what we did is we merged the RX and PX tables by stacking them on top of each other, and then we used the other relevant data given, like the BC SNICD code, to identify the BC diagnosis codes and MBC diagnosis codes. One thing I would like to point out over here is that in our data set there are totally 6,618 unique procedure codes, and since we want to combine all of the information of a particular patient in one row, we would like to get a way in which we can get all of this information in a single row. For that purpose, we wanted to recategorize this procedure codes, and to do so, we went to the source of these procedure codes defined, that is the American Medical Association. There we had like already predefined categories for each of the procedure codes. For example, if there is a CPT1 IAN code, those codes are corresponding to the procedure codes which belong to anesthesia services. In such manner, all the codes which are given to us are categorized broadly into CPT1, CPT2, CPT3, and HCPCS codes. SCPCS2 codes, and that is a categorization we used to finally end up with 29 procedure code categories. And a similar approach was followed for the NDC, the national drug codes as well. So for these drug codes, there are total 13,931 unique drug codes, and for these drug codes we were given extra information from the Novartis team to categorize them based on the brand, and these top 10 breast cancer based drug brands are the 10 categories which were used. Apart from that, we also went ahead and found out the drugs based on the application. So we wanted to categorize the drug class. We created something called drug classes, which is based on the application of the purpose of each drug. So so two drugs which belong to two different brands but actually do essentially the same thing will belong to the same drug class. For example, if you look at the serum drug class, it contains all the drugs which will selectively modulate estrogen receptor. So so that is one of the ways we try to recategorize the drug classes. And since we wanted to accommodate all the information, we were very reluctant to lose out of any data, and hence we explored each and every variable with in depth, and we found that some of the I'll just tell some of the examples of the features which we modulated. So drug dosage multiplier and the charges related to procedure, these two values, these two columns had negative values, and also they were extremely unevenly distributed. So as you can see, most of the information rows corresponded to the initial part, and the rest everything was very not very relevant. So that is why we actually ended up binning. We defined a custom binning based on the value counts for each of the categories, and post our binning size, our data distribution will look something like this. It is not exactly a normal distribution, but it is still better. So now one more kind of feature engineering which we intended to do is we observed that there are some procedures who have been customly modified. So there is another column which says that if the procedure has been modified for the particular patient, we are assuming for any particular reason, right? So there were description and other details as well, but due to the time constraint, we do not apply the NLP statistics, but directly we made sure that that point is mentioned, that if there is any change in the procedure, so there we created a Boolean variable which says whether the procedure was modified or not. And then again we have another column says flexible field. So this is again a client customization available for the claim IDs, which will again be telling us whether or not there was any particular customization done. And since we will be merging all of our data into one row, we wanted to incorporate the time element of it. To do so, we created a new column called week ID. This week ID corresponds to week number concatenated with the year of that particular week. So in that way, we can have the total number of unique weeks for each patient that the patient had existed in our data set. So before directly jumping to the model training, we did intend to remove a particular set of columns which we did not seem fit for the purpose of identifying the patient's health. For example, the claim ID related columns, we do not believe in that those will be the columns which will be adding value to the patient's health status, and also other identifiers like patient ID. So we did split our training data, our whole data set into 75% training and 25% testing data. One more filter which we applied on our before training the model is that we wanted to make sure that no information is coming. We wanted to make sure that it actually represents more to the real world example. Hence, what we did is we identified only the first date of we identified the last date at which the patient was detected with MBC, and then we removed all the data points which corresponded to after the patient has been detected with MBC. So only records which have the service date less than or equal to the minimum MBC detected date, those were only kept and all others were removed. In the case where the MBC code was not present, that is the patient was never diagnosed with MBC, in that case we left we considered all the full information for the particular patient. So as you can see, our initial goal of developing model which would be easily fittable and easily replicable is what we were able to achieve by training multiple models. And if you look at the closely at the fitting time, so our top performing random forest model took only about 3.1 seconds to actually fit the whole data set. That is because we have reduced the dimensionality to only 20,000 rows, that is 20,000 patients. And if you see, our model is very consistent in terms of accuracy, recall and specificity. That is because if you look at the MBC and non-MBC patients data, it is a little skewed towards the non-MBC part, as we would expect in any kind of Boolean tag classification. So we did a resampling of the training data to make sure that the data is spread evenly. And moving on, we also want to point out that we aim to make sure that the parameters which our model is using to get this phenomenal accuracy and specificity is again relevant, right? So we actually looked at the feature importance, top features. If you look at them, they are like weak ID and the procedure code which says CPT RAD. So RAD corresponds to all the procedures which are radiation based. So this is how we have developed. And if you see the top performing random forest features, the features which random forest has used are also the top correlated features in all of our in our data set previous to developing the model. So the weak ID is the top negatively correlated feature, and also the the unit of service bin is again one of the top performing random forest features, which is there in the top positively correlated features. Finally, we did 5-fold cross validation on our training data set to make sure that it does not overfit to our training data, and the accuracy and the confusion matrix is also shown over here. So for the second line of therapy, it was very important. Second problem statement it was very important to detect the line of treatment. So since we do not know what is the line of treatment, we defined the line of treatment to be the class of drugs that the patient is taking. Since the class of drugs actually correspond to the kind of treatment these drugs do, the drugs have the effect. That is why we chose that as a line of treatment. And in any case, deviation from the current line of drug class is considered to be a change in the line of treatment. So all the outcomes, the targeted outcome, the methodology are all very similar. The only the key difference will be that earlier we used the drug class as one of the features in our problem statement 1, but here these drug classes will be acting as the target variables. So this is the same thing which we have already shown, and we did the similar kind of exploration and manipulation to all the columns. we did make sure that the service date is less than or equal to the minimum of the second line of treatment for the dates. And since this time the patients did not were not actually skewed to any of the side, we did not perform any resampling on for the model training. So again, in this type of results, if we see, the top performing decision tree gave us 96% accuracy and consistently for recall and specificity, and trained only for 0.4 seconds of fitting time. And again, we did look at the exact same trend, that is the top features used by the model are again the top correlated negatively or positively features. So the kind of tools which we used are the Google Cloud notebooks, because we needed more RAM space to construct the dummy variables and then do a summarization. We did use Kaggle kernels to run the models without needing to be monitored, and we used regex for matching the expressions for categorization. And one thing which we want to which we would have done is that you would have done a better part in hyperparameter tuning. Right now the results which you see are on the default settings for each and every model, and we did not get time to properly hyperparameter tune each of the models, since due to the time constraints. And one more thing which we would have tried to approach the problem is where a continual learning model, and we wanted to treat each patient as separately, train the model, and then treat the new patient as a new data and retrain the model continuously. So this kind of setting would have been possible using a neural network and that is something we wanted to do, but due to time constraint we could not. And we did try to attach the sources of the information, and that concludes it. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Rahul, and thank you also for your entire team, Team Affinitor. Well done. Very intriguing. We have questions for you from our judges. So judges, now's your opportunity to ask some questions of Team Affinitor. I'm going to open the floor. Feel free to raise your hand or jump in and ask your question to the team. The floor is yours.
Then, while everybody's preparing for the questions, I just love the name. So I just want to give kudos for that good thinking, a Novartis brand. And I actually was in Novartis while we were launching Affinitor. So thank you for that.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, there is no downside of a little sycophancy of bringing in the team name from a Novartis brand. Gary, you've got your hand up first. We're going to turn to Gary.
Yes, I really like how the team is doing this work and how the model is performing so fast. But I think the fast response of the model should not cover the time that the team actually put in, or the thoughtness of preparing the data. Because without the cleansing and thoroughness of preparing the data, there would not be this performance from the model. One very tiny question I have is, when you are using the weak ID, what is your starting point for the weak ID? It's like when the patient gets their first diagnosis or the first line treatment.
So the way we are using weak ID is we use it like a category, right? So we treat it like a categorical variable. So for each row we have a particular weak ID. So for example, if patient 1 has week 2 and patient 2 has week 1, so there will be 2 categories. And then the third row, if the patient 1 has again week 2, week 3 maybe. So in that case, when we are actually performing the dummy variables and performing the summation, we choose the unique number of weeks for that particular patient. So in that way, we do not face the challenge of where to start and where to end, because we will have so if the category for the patient week ID corresponds to 2, that means that patient was there for 2 weeks in that particular data set.
Okay.
So we have like a tolerance of 7 days. So if there was a Sunday and then a Saturday, in that case, yes, our model is susceptible to 2 weeks of 7 days of difference.
So you're saying it's the amount of time this patient is showing up in the data itself, and then you use this as a variable to categorize how long the patient has been staying in the data set?
Correct, absolutely.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gary.
Oh,
Now return, next question, jump on in.
Sure. So this is Lauren, and I have a quick question regarding to your drug classes. When you define the drug classes, I think this is a good way, basically, to clean up the data to be ready to input to the model more efficiently. But the classes, I think there's one class which is a very important class you missed there is CDK inhibitor. So you didn't consider CDK inhibitor. I didn't see the CDK inhibitor as one drug class, which is a very important drug class in metastatic breast cancer.
Okay, thank you for the input. We did, since there was no actual direct association like for the procedure codes with the American Medical Association, we did go through a lot of blog posts, and using that is when we developed this drug classes. And maybe Pritika or someone from the team can add more onto it.
I'm sorry if I'm not wrong. I think we have included it, but I think we abbreviated it as KI instead of CDK, like inhibitors. So CDK kinase inhibitor.
I see. Yeah, got you.
Oh, is this okay? I'm not the medical
this
guy.
is the CDK. This is all the drugs from the CD kinase inhibitors classes, right?
Yes.
Oh, got you. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Floor is still open. More questions from the judges, clarifications, commentary.
Well, so I would just wanted to make a comment. Sorry, I just moved myself to a different place because it was too cold down there. So what's interesting is that we're using a bunch of drugs. I mean, almost all the teams were using a bunch of drugs for predictions purposes, right? And I think Gary brought it up earlier at the very one of the teams was presenting. You know, some of the drugs that are being used are specifically used because the breast cancer is already metastatic. So we didn't really think it through when we first designed the competition. We didn't really think about this, but obviously those kind of things will be highly predictive of the presence of metastatic breast cancer. So I guess I'm thinking that if we were to do something like this project in the future, or if we were to do something like this for us, I would probably remove, the access of the analyst to drugs like that. Like I just wouldn't be, the analyst shouldn't be able to use, those products for prediction, right? Because the two are sort of like interrelated. So we made it really easy. Easy. I mean, that's not a good word, because I think you guys all did a phenomenal job, but it was a little bit easier to make that prediction, right? So if I remove some of these predictors, then it would have been a little bit harder to do. But at the same time, we don't want to make it so crazy that we get nowhere with these competitions. It's just a comment that I'm like reflecting on myself. Really, it's not really a criticism of anything. It's just as I was listening to these presentations, that's what came to my mind.
Yeah, and I think, having limited time is also, I think, a factor.
Yeah.
So I think all the team members, they did a great job. I mean, we live this day in and day out. So just so that you know, right? Like, so I myself have been in this space for the last 15 years, and the APLD data I use on a regular basis. I started like you guys, looking at the data, and now it's really more storytelling. But you guys, all of you, I think did a phenomenal job. So thank you.
But I mean, if you think about it, what you all did is from an impact perspective. We were talking about something that's hugely important, and we're just kind of at the beginning of if you were interested in a life like this, like in a profession like this. I mean, you can see how impactful you can be. I mean, to predict whether somebody has metastatic breast cancer or doesn't, without looking anything clinical. I mean, there's really not much clinical data that we gave you. It's phenomenal, right? So and you all did. I mean, some of these models are pretty incredible. They do an excellent job in terms of accuracy. I also was going to make, I just let it go, but at some point, I think I also recognized that there were some presentations that started looking at things or that were making decisions on a champion model based on not just accuracy, but a trade-off between type 1 and type 2 error, which is a really good thing to do. In certain cases, like in cancer, that's kind of like a pivotal thing to look at, and that's why I wanted to make sure that we all look at it.
Right. Get it. 100% agree with you. And I really want to thank everybody also for your creativity. It's really trying to step out of the standard data science and trying to be creative by looking, for example, at the different geographies, by different body parts, by different product combinations, trying to group it together. I think that's exactly what we're looking for. And I really want to thank everybody also trying to explore, for example, new types of approaches, new types of models. And really going out of the box. I think that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great comments from all the judges.
Just one more thing I would say. Sorry, I really liked everything that I saw here, so that's why I'm making comments here. I think there were approaches here that we don't typically do. There was at the very beginning, there were a couple of teams that went down the road of looking at text and trying to make it into a variable. That's not something that I do in this particular kind of. So we're not into text analytics for the most part, but there were text elements in some of the presentations. So that I've seen lots of things that is different than what we would have normally done here. So thank you.
So I have a reminder before we wrap things up, because that was our last presentation. Our judges, you still have one job left to do, and that is to vote for these guys.
Oh, yeah, right.
So votes, take a few moments to put your votes in, and I'll just share just a quick reflection. That was all teams presenting, but as we said before, that was 7 of 12 teams that started the process, and there was almost 100 other candidates that didn't get to compete because of limitations of space. So you guys really are the cream of the crop. And while there's only going to be 3 finalists or 3 winners in the competition, you guys have all done an amazing job. And big thanks also to our judges giving their input. So get those votes in. And here's what we're going to be doing now. Right now, it is almost 25 after the hour. The judges have a little bit more work to do. So we are going to do a breakout with the judges for about 10 or so minutes where we're going to make our final deliberations. So in the meanwhile, you have a chance to catch one more break. We will come back at 35 after the hour. And at that point, we'll be sharing the results. So hang in there for a little bit. Judges, get your last votes in, and you'll be prompted, judges, our just core team of judges, that is Igor, Gellert, Narai, and myself, to join a breakout. You'll get prompted by John in just a moment to accept that, and then we will go into an alternative universe for just about 10 minutes. So participants, take a break. We'll be back with you in just a moment.
Thank you. Can we actually see our Mentimeter as well?
Oh, we're gonna share those results with you guys momentarily. So right now, it's just the judges that get to see that, but we will be giving the scores out. We will share the full results as well afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. John, when you can push the invites.
Well, I've been sitting here all day. I've been sitting in this waiting room. And I've been waiting on my friends. Yes, I'm waiting on this conference call. All alone. And I'm on hold. Well, yes, I'm on hold. I hope it's not all day. Hey! Well, I wonder where they are. Yes, I wonder where my friends have gone. Where'd they go? Tell me, where could they be while I'm waiting on this conference call? I don't know. Well, I'm holding on my phone. Yes, I'm holding on the line. Hey! I don't know where they are. I don't know why I'm still alone. I'm on hold. Oh, yes, I'm on hold. I hope it's not all day. Hey!
Well, let me tell y'all a story about a man who was on hold all day. Yes, he was. Now, maybe he had the time wrong, and maybe he didn't. There's just no way for me to say. And yes, I have seen some long hold times in my day. Yes, I have. And this was one of the worst. Now, this young man did not hang up the telephone, and you guess what happened? Yeah, that call began. That call started.
So stay on hold. You gotta stay on hold. Don't go away. Are you all ready? Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Are you all ready? Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Get set. Let's go. Does your hair look right? Is it fly done up? Have you popped your pimples? Have you got your coat and some lip beyond? Just keep it simple. Are you all cashed up? I could lend you some. Well, I'd be glad to. Have you had a think and a warm-up drink? No, 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 no. Are you all ready? Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Are you all ready? Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Get set. Let's go. Is the cat put out? Is the iron off? We don't want to come home to a fire. Have you trimmed your beard? Are your sandals shine? Do you look like a hipster messiah? Have you got your keys? Have you got ID? Did you bring a comb for Gary? Have you had a think and a warm-up drink? No, 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 no. Are you all ready? Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Are you all ready? Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Get set. Let's go. Leave your book and leave the mirror, 'cause you're already stunning. The sky above was never clearer and the engine's running. So cast aside your novelty ties and bury your vendettas. Life is short, but tonight your ass is mine, 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 mine. Are you all ready? Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Are you all ready? Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Get set. Let's go. Leave your book and leave the mirror, 'cause you're already stunning. The sky above was never clearer and the engine's running. Well, the end is nigh and there's not much time to get things rolling. Life is pain, but we're okay. No, 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 no. What have I forgotten? No, no, no. Are you all ready? Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Are you all ready? Are you ready? Get set. Are you ready? Get set.
All right, John, we are coming back. So we're going to get restarted in just a moment. But I do want to say thank you, everybody, for their patience. Man, was it a tough deliberation. The judges were really split, and I think you're going to be a little bit surprised and excited when we come to you with the results. But before we do, we have a couple of things to get to. And we have a guest star here with us from Novartis, Dr. Belen Fraley. If you remember, Belen had kicked things off when we first started the hackathon. And we wanted to invite her back. We thought only right because she leads the data and digital group here at Novartis. And Belen, we want to turn it over to you to share some words, and then I know everybody wants to hear the results, but first we'd love to hear your perspective. So Belen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. No, and it's a pleasure to be here. I've been following this event for the past 2 weeks, and I have to tell you, it's been already voiced out across the company, not only here in the US, but back in the headquarters in Basel, around this collaboration that is taking place between all of these academic organizations, students, and as we build this data science capability within our company. So this is excellent exercise, and really the representation of the vision on how to build like a solid data and digital foundation. We are pretty comfortable and investing quite a bit of energy and resources here in Novartis because we believe this is the way to build talent and to really start changing the way that we have leveraged data science and more traditional methodologies into real life examples and needs. And this is the time just to start getting pharma into all of those discussions that traditionally happen in different venues, right? So I'm excited about this opportunity and really welcome the opportunity to be with all of you today and communicate the results of this hackathon that I'm sure you are waiting to hear. So thanks everyone for this, and I don't want just to make you wait more for this, for the readout of the results. So let me start backwards with the third place. In this position, we had a tie, and the team was discussing in this staff deliberation that I would announce that the tie happened between two teams, teams 12 and 3, which is Affinity and Sozo, teams coming from the University of Columbia. So really congratulations for this team.
Virtual.
Thank you.
Great work for Paritosh, Pritika, Srija, Vainavi, and Rahul. Congratulations on team 3. And team 12, Zozo, Agustin, Chanyang, Chelsea, Elaine, Wenji, and Xiaoyu. Congratulations for everyone. This has been like definitely a really discussed tie between both of your teams.
Okay, we had all the judges super supportive of both teams, so thank you all.
That's good. So let's move to the second place. From the second place, we have a team that is coming from a collaboration with different universities, University of Cincinnati, New Jersey Institute of Technology, Johns Hopkins, and this is Team 10, Breast Friend. Congratulations in this second place. Let's go to the individual team members that form this team. So we can clap, all of you. So we have Ariboy, Charakarm, Shuao King, and Yves as being kind of the winners of this second place award. Congratulations, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, and let's get to the first place of this hackathon. I'm very excited just to announce that the winners of this hackathon is Team 6 from NYU, the team Meliora. Congratulations. I would like just to have the judges as well sharing some of the words across all of these teams, but let me just highlight the names here. We have Long, Yuhan, Sifan, and Yan Juan, part of this team. Really our congratulations in this exercise. Thanks so much.
Amazing job. Thank you, Belen. Well, you know, we always say that there is no losers, everybody's winners. You guys really were amazing. This was really tough deliberation, but this has been a long journey. It's been almost 3 weeks since we started, and we know how much time and effort you guys have put into this. Your semesters are long. It's a very unorthodox semester. Some people are not even in the US right now because of school, because of visas and visiting, and you guys still did it, and you did an amazing job. From my perspective, really big congratulations. But I want to stop here because our architect and visionary of this idea going back more than half a year ago, Narai, I want to turn over to you for some closing words for the students, both for the winners and for those who participated.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dan. I definitely want to thank you as a partner to Deliberate Innovations. I hope that as Novartis, we're coming as a data science partner now to everyone. I mean, I really want to do the hackathon, and I totally appreciate everyone who even had to drop out because of all the challenges that are going with the data, as well as you guys who have presented. Everybody did an amazing job. I really appreciate it. It was totally beyond my expectations, I have to say. In terms of the delivery of the presentations, delivery of the solutions, you understanding the connection with the patient, and to Gillard's earlier point, right? Like we really are making impacts in people's lives. We really are making impacts in a lot of the real time problems that we face. It's not data science only just for methodology purposes. It is, we're talking about lives of people and diseases and treatments of people here, which I think most of us from Novartis, as you see all the faces, that's what motivates us every day. Even though we're not known out there to be data science companies, but I think we really do an important job of bringing technology, methodology with the real life challenges that people face every day. So I want to thank all the teams, and we had favorites, different favorites from the team. So definitely, and I definitely want to encourage everyone. Our announcements for internships were going to be happening in January. So definitely feel free to connect with your coaches, connect with all of us. We would love to give you opportunity more than 2 weeks, which is about the 3-month internship that we have to select people. So please be interested, welcome. It's really going to be similar problems you're going to solve, but as you all mentioned, you're going to have much more longer time frame to solve the problems where you can try many more methodologies. So I want to thank everyone for the time and the effort, and I'm sure that you're going to keep connected with your team members as well. I love the diversity. I love seeing so many different people coming from different colleges, different education backgrounds, masters, PhDs. So we hope we can keep it continuous. Thank you.
All right. Well, Narai, thank you. And for folks, winners, you'll be getting gift cards coming to your email soon. But more importantly, thanks again for participating in making the Great Oncology Hackathon great. So I'm signing off here from New Jersey, John from Connecticut, and the whole team from Novartis here in New Jersey and all over. Guys, thank you so much for making this happen. Please, if you have any questions or anything, do reach out. But for now, have a great weekend, and thanks again for participating.
And I